Hello and welcome to another episode here of my little podcast that I got going on where we've been talking about some random games on Relay of Gaming, a little silly little game I got going on here where we like to discuss pick a few random games and then discuss them. And then also we talk a little bit about modern gaming news. And then I'll be doing like some kind of a retrospective of some sort, which is going to be the more bulk of the podcast itself. Although sometimes the modern gaming stuff and all can kind of take over a little bit. But basically, but we'll have a retrospective on something. So more recently, I've been just kind of going through the years in gaming, and so this one will be for 1998. But basically, it's just an overall discussion about just video games and celebrating video games of what's going on with the new stuff, along with celebrating the past as well too. And so this year we'll be looking at 1998, but we also have some pretty chunky stuff to get into here for modern gaming stuff. So wanted to this episode, we'll see how it goes. This actually might go on a little, for it might be a bit of a long one, as I'm gonna have to split this up a little bit as I started making my notes here. And I was like, oh, there's quite a bit of stuff to say here. We had the Game Awards, so I wanted to touch base a bit on that, and then also 1998 was a pretty awesome year for video games too. So if you're listening to this, then by all means, just feel free to relax, sit back, or if you're on a long drive or anything, and hopefully at least I can give you some information and somewhat entertained as if you clicked on this, and I do appreciate that, and at least hopefully I can pay that back with giving you a bit of knowledge. But in the meantime, though, we're going to start off here with Relay of Gaming here. And so again, this is just a silly little game that I've created here where I have a whole long list of video games that I've been jotting down for years now, just trying to keep track of games in my, but honestly, I mean, I would never play all these games in a lifetime, but just games that I feel like at some point I would like to check out. And so I just use a number generator. And so I just pick 3 games that I select at random and just discuss them a little bit. And then eventually I'll put some of the clips of some of these games on YouTube Shorts also too. And again, I'm just kind of doing this just sort of archive video games as a whole and on my YouTube Shorts and all to have a bit of a, I guess you can say like a virtual library of some sort, right? And all where you can at least get a bit of information on these video games along with a little visual representation of them as well too. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it here. So for Relay of Gaming, so we're going to start off here with the first pick. And so let's see what we select here. 547. We got, oh, okay. Golden Axe, Revenge of Death Adder. Okay, that's a more of an obscure title, but I like it like that. Let's see. Okay, going on for the next one. 1,448. I'm up to 1,640, by the way. Let's see here. Okay, another interesting one. So, The Magical Quest, starring Mickey Mouse. Oh, and I forgot to play the little sound bit there, too, also. Just for shits and giggles. Highly unprofessional here. Okay. And for the next one, the last one here. 962. And so that is for Pikmin 4. Oh. Okay. All right, so some interesting choices here for sure. And so let's just kind of start talking honestly with these 3 games here. I don't have a whole lot of information on them, but let's kind of go over here what I do know at least about them here. And so starting with Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder. So this one here, it was basically, so there was Golden Axe 1 and 2. And then, I mean, there was a Golden Axe 3 that was on the Sega Genesis that mainly only, I believe, came out in Japan and maybe Europe. I'm not 100% sure. But what people really consider like the main third sequel is this one called Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder, which is this one here that I picked. And so this one only made it to the arcades. And I mean, it has a bit of a different look than the other Golden Axe games. The sprites are more detailed for sure, and just has a bit of a overall different look. And some of the characters you can pick are a bit different. Like you can pick the axe battler, but then it has like I believe you can pick like a centaur, and I believe you can pick like this golem of some sort with the what's his name, Thunderhead, the dwarf with the lightning powers from the first two that rides on him, if I recall right. And I mean, but ultimately, it's a hack and slash game, and but I forgot the arcade board that it runs on, but it has a lot of like cool scaling effects and all that. So it definitely seems like a bit of a step up from the graphics of the first one, or the first two. And so it's always had my interest to really dive deep into the game. I've played it a little bit through emulation, but just haven't really gotten too far on it. So this will actually be a fun one to experiment a bit with here, and all I'm gonna capture some footage on it. And yeah, it just never made it to the home systems. I mean, it wouldn't have been able to have been done on the Sega Genesis, at least not close to arcade perfect. But the Saturn could have, I'm pretty sure, could have handled it, and it seemed like it was the right fit for it. But with everything that happened with the Saturn and all, I'm sure there was plenty of reasons why it didn't come out on that. Although I have heard, and I could be wrong on this, but I want to say that I think that the 32X was going to get this game at one point. I could be wrong, but I want to say that I think I heard that, or was it just the original Golden Axe? I don't remember, but I think I'm pretty sure it was this one here, because again, there's a lot of like scaling effects and all that. It would have been really difficult. I mean, actually, it wouldn't have really been able to replicate that, like say like on the Sega Genesis. They would have had to scale this game back quite a bit. But if you've never heard of this game, it's a cool looking game. Definitely, it definitely looks cool. And if you've Golden Axe is going to be fairly popular, so if you have any appreciation for the first Golden Axe game or even the second one, definitely check this one out. At least on YouTube, as again, it's not available anywhere as far as I know to play officially. So you would have to definitely resort to emulation on this one. But still, it's a good looking, a pretty cool looking game, and so I think I'll have a bit of fun to explore this game again. I think I only got like into 2 levels some years ago when I played it on emulation. But yeah, Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder. And so the next game that I got here on the list was the Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse. And so here's another game I'm not too familiar with that's on the Super Nintendo. I do know that it was recognized to be a very fun Capcom Disney game on the Super Nintendo. This is still when Capcom was doing a lot of good stuff from the Disney licenses on the home systems. And I want to say I think this game came out in 1990. It would have been 1992, I believe. And because it came out around the same time as World of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. And so that one I was familiar with on the Sega Genesis. And that one is a very excellent game. And I remember it being shown off in the magazines along with the Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse, as there were basically like two pretty top tier Disney platforming games starring Mickey Mouse. But what I do know of this game is it seems like you can change into different outfits. Like I believe you can be like a fireman at some port or so, and it gives you different power ups or so as you're going through through the different levels. And it seems like it has a lot of that Disney magic from back in the day, where it has very creative fantasy-like settings and all. And just seems like a fun little Disney platformer. So I'll actually be curious also to check this game out too. And maybe this one in Golden Axe, I'll try to actually beat it here soon. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're not two super long games. So that'll be fun to kind of explore those games there. But then for the third one here, so I have Pikmin 4. This one here, I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with the Pikmin games. I did play the Pikmin, the first one, about a couple months ago or so, and I actually put a little bit of on my YouTube channel. And it seems, I mean, they're fun puzzle games and all, and they actually have my interest to play through more. But I only have access to 1 and 2 that I can play through emulation. I might have 3 on the Wii U by certain means, but Pikmin 4, that's going to be the one on the Switch, I believe. So I don't have access to that one there. So I think what I'll do on this one is, if I don't think I want to buy Pikmin 4 right now on the Switch, so I might defer back to either Pikmin 3 or 2. um, on that one there. So I don't have a whole lot of information on it. But other than just that they're, at least with the first one, you play like this little alien and you're like in a garden and you're trying to build your ship again and all. But you're like really small though. And Shigeru Miyamoto got the idea, at least for the first one, while he was gardening supposedly. And it's a cute, again, I'm speaking about the first one, but it's a cute little game. And the puzzles actually, as far as I've gotten it, are really fun and definitely has a, that classic Nintendo charm on it and all. Back then, when it first came out, at least the first one, I wrote it off like, just another lame little kiddie game. But it's actually really fun and very creative. And so, like I said, more recently that I started playing on it, I've really learned to appreciate this game. But yeah, so don't have a whole lot there again on this one here. These three definitely are ones that I just don't have much information on, but it'll be fun to have a look at. But let's start talking a little bit about for the Game Awards here. So I'm just going to kind of go over a few things here that I'm going to go over some of I'm going to go over the winners here for what won in the categories of so the game of the year and so forth. And then after that, just some of the announcements that were shown that got me kind of excited here. Let's see. Ultimately, it wasn't that bad of a show. I rarely have watched the game of the year shows all the way through, but this year I didn't have a whole lot to do on, when was it, on Thursday that it came out, and so I was just there watching it and all while I was hanging out with my kids, and the show wasn't too bad. It was they had some decent announcements. Some things that I was kind of hoping to see, but I've kind of learned now with the Game Awards show, is you have to kind of set your expectations fairly low, right? Because there's so many like leaks and all that get out there that you can really hype yourself up that, this is going to get revealed and this is going to get revealed. And it gets to the point where it's like, I highly doubt all these things that are getting leaked are going to show up all at once. It just, I mean, it'd be awesome if it did, but we were getting things like Half-Life 3, Final Fantasy 7 Part 3 remake, or whatever they choose to call it, a remake of Ocarina of Time, and all kinds of stuff. And it's like, okay, I doubt all of that's going to show up. But there was some pretty cool stuff though that was announced. So I just made a quick list here of some of the things that I felt that caught my interest more. But the one that took the big prize, to no surprise really to anyone, for the game of the year this year was Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And you're going to hear me say this game a lot as I go through the awards here because they pretty much made a sweep. It was definitely a Clair Obscur night and well deserved. And in some cases it kind of sucks because there were some other really top quality games in some of these categories. But I mean, Clair Obscur was just it's an amazing game. And I mean, and it's not like it didn't have like good competition this year. I mean, there was some pretty decent stuff here. I mean, I think that had it not been for Clair Obscur, people were all over Silksong, right? But I mean, for me personally, it was, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a weak year, but maybe not quite as strong as like previous years and all as far as for Game of the Year nominees. But Clair Obscur was definitely not only this year, but I think it would have stood tall amongst most any other year, right? And all, just because it is such a clever game and a game that I had some issues with it at first. I still do kind of have some issues with it, but as the experience overall kind of keeps resonating in me, I just find myself thinking about this game more and more, especially as I listen to the music. It is so damn good. And I mean, well-deserved win for Clair Obscur all the way around. And I think I saw something that it said that the creator, the main dude behind this game, he thanked Hironobu Sakaguchi, I guess, for just being an inspiration, right? And all for, creating games that he used to like to play as a kid. So I thought that was kind of cool, right? Kind of coming around to, the OG of the turn-based RPGs. Well, one of the OGs anyways. But yeah, but Clair Obscur, to no surprise, right? And all that it won. But in the next category, we had for Best Game Direction. And so that one also went to Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and definitely felt that that was well-deserved too. The game is just gorgeous to look at, and so I'm not surprised that it won that category. Let's see. But then for the Best Narrative, also Clair Obscur Expedition 33, it's just, the story is just, it really is amazing. Again, it kind of doesn't suck or anything, but it a little just kind of meandering in the middle, but it's still a very solid game. And actually, I kind of want to go through the game again because I feel like there's a lot of things that now that I know what happens and everything, that's going to make the middle part of the game just that much more appealing to me and all. Then where things are just going to make more sense. It's like, oh, okay, so this is what was happening and all. Kind of like when you watch a movie like The Sixth Sense for the second time. But yeah, I mean, it definitely I can agree with that with the best narrative. Well, although, well, I should say because I haven't really played the other games too, so I guess I can't really comment on it. But this was very a strong story though for this one. Best art direction goes to Clear Obscure Expedition 33, and yeah, I mean the game is just gorgeous to look at. It's definitely stunning, unique too. We don't how I mean I can't say of another game that I've played that had a kind of very French aesthetic to it, right? Yeah, but it's done really beautifully and all. It's just it really is something else. Best score and musical, again for Claire Obscure. Although I will say though that I've been going through Metroid Prime 4 and I'm still working my way through it. And the music on that is so good too. Just so good. And Hollow Knight Silk Song too. I mean, the bit that I've played of it has really good music too, just like the first one. But again, we're talking about something that is just almost what feels like once in a generation. And Lorian Testard, I believe is how you say his name, he did an amazing job in the soundtrack. And then the whole story of how they found him on SoundCloud and all, it's just amazing. If you don't know, if for some reason you're not really following a lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes, the making of this game, and this is why Clair Obscure is such a big deal, because it's not just that it's a good game and all, it's that the way everything came together from such a small team, it's very much an underdog story, right? And that where they came out winning, and it's truly beautiful. Just look it up. It's amazing, and not just the composer, but also like the writer, the main guy that formed this company, and Samfall, I think Entertainment, I think they're called. It's just truly amazing. It's something else. Very inspirational. But best audio design, this one went to Battlefield 6, and no surprise there. That one was I mean, Club has some pretty good sound effects. The other one that I've kind of played was Silent Hill F, which has good sound effects too. But Battlefield 6, I haven't played this one and all, but I can say that the Battlefield games that I have played before in the past sound amazing. I mean, it's definitely one that you want to crank up your audio sound and all if you can, because it's one of the most realistic sounding like guns and makes it. I mean, just the sound effects. It really amps up the intensity, right? And as you're in these firefights and with explosions going on everywhere, that sound really realistic, but also to the 3D audio spacing or surround sound and all, however they do it sounds really convincing. So again, I haven't played this one, Battlefield 6, but I can only imagine, right? And all that the sound effects are amazing on it. Let's see, but then we go to best performance. And so this one was a little tough, but I mean, again, Claire Obscure had what, three nominees. So Ben Starr, Charlie Cox, and Jennifer English. And they all did amazing. All would have been very deserving. I mean, I could have definitely seen like Troy Baker's Indiana Jones to an extent. I mean, I don't think, I mean, his performance was it was a very good impression of Harrison Ford for sure, but I haven't beaten the game to know like if he really, utilized a lot of range in it and all, but he always does good. I can't speak too much for Silent Hill F as I didn't get too far in it. So I would have been highly biased on this one too, also for Claire Obscure, and Jennifer English ended up winning it. Either one of them I thought would have done a really great, would have been a really great pick, but her role in it on all, I think mainly because her role is, I mean, if there was a main character in this game, she would probably be it. And a lot of the story, I'll just say, revolves around her. So, yeah, I mean, and she did have some very powerful moments. So, yeah, I feel like it was a well-deserved win. Although I wouldn't have hated it if either Ben Starr or Charlie Cox won it too, because they did amazing too. But then for innovation and accessibility, it was Doom: The Dark Ages at one. I haven't messed around with it too much and all on the accessibility options, but I can just say that's cool though, right? On how they do these options to try to get more people into games, and that might otherwise have some struggles with it. So I think that's awesome. Just gaming in general, right? That they're doing that. Games for Impact. So this is for a thought-provoking game with a pro-social meaning or message. So the winner of this one was South of Midnight. I played a little bit of this game. I checked it out when I was on Game Pass, and it has my interest. I do want to go back to it. It kind of reminds me of sort of like a cross between Uncharted and Primal, the PlayStation 2 game from some years ago. But but as far as like the overall story, I'm not sure. But that's not so much the story, but I guess just the overall message on the game. But I'd be curious to check that game out though. It has my attention to try to play it at some point. And then best ongoing, I don't really have a one to pick on this just because again I don't really play these kind of games. But I picked Marvel Rivals just because it seemed like a pretty cool game. A little bit that I played of it, but it ended up going to No Man's Sky though. And then for best community support, so this is recognizing a game for outstanding community support, transparency, and responsiveness, inclusive of social media activity and game updates and patches. This one was Baldur's Gate 3, that one. And a bit that I played of that game, I definitely really like it. So one game that I do want to try to beat at some point. And best independent game, so this one went to Claire Obscure Expedition 33. It's almost like, oh, that is right. I mean, it is an independent studio, so yeah. Best debut indie game was Claire Obscure Expedition 33. Best mobile game was Umamumi Pretty Derby. I'm not sure what that is. Some kind of a anime mobile game. I picked Sonic Rumble just because, Sonic, but yeah, that one didn't win. Best VR AR game. So that went to The Midnight Walk. Not familiar with that game. Best action game went to Hades 2. I picked Shinobi Art of Vengeance because I did beat that one earlier. But Hades 2 won it. So, I mean, one day I'll get into Hades and then maybe eventually Hades 2. Best action adventure was Hollow Knight Silksong. So I'm glad this one at least won this award. Because the other games are like pretty big budget games, right? Like Death Stranding 2, Ghost of Yote, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and Split Fiction. I mean, those are all kind of like you can consider like AAA big budget games and all that. And all no shade to them. I mean, they all seem amazing. I've played at least Ghost of Yote and Indiana Jones to an extent, and the other ones, I mean, they definitely have my interest. But the fact that a 2D Metroidvania game can still take this category, it also warms my heart. Best RPG, no surprise, Claire Obscure, Expedition 33. And the best fighting game was Fatal Fury, City of Wolves. I picked Virtua Fighter 5, but it was Fatal Fury, that one. Which, I mean, I wouldn't mind checking that game out. Best family game was Donkey Kong Bonanza, which I was surprised. I thought it might have been... It's just because Donkey Kong Bonanza, it's a great game. It's a fun platformer, and I can see maybe why, because it is a bit easy game, right, and all that, like anyone can get into. But it doesn't really have it has very limited multiplayer where like another player can kind of control Pauline. But the other games have like a lot of multiplayer options and all, like Lego Party, Lego Voyagers, Mario Kart World, Sonic Racing, and Split Fiction. So I'm kind of surprised Donkey Kong won that one. Ben Sim and Strategy, so that went to Final Fantasy Tactics. So that's cool that, many years later, it's still holding ground. And Best Sports and Racing was Mario Kart World. And let's see, Best Multiplayer was Arc Raiders. Seems like that's kind of a popular kind of a shooter game of some sort. Best Adaptation ended up going to The Last of Us Season 2. And Most Anticipated Games, no surprise, went to Grand Theft Auto 6. Content Creator of the Year was that Moist Critical guy. Let's see. Best Esports Games went to Counter-Strike 2. That game just seems to be going and going and going, huh? Best Esports Athlete went to Chovy for League of Legends, I believe. Let's see. And then Best Esports Team went to Gen G. And Player's Voice, let's see, went to Wuthering Waves. So what is this? Let's see. Oh, okay, so this is Player's Voice is 100% fan voted award. Oh, and Wuthering Waves won, huh? Oh, and that was over Claire Obscure, Dispatch, Genshin Impact, Hollow Knight Silksong. So, for what it is, that's kind of a big deal. But yeah, those were the winners there for the Game Awards. So again, as you can see, Claire Skier kind of took over on that one. But there was some announcements that had my interest. I like I said, I was watching the show and all, and it was, but I didn't like completely catch on to everything. So these are just some of the things that I picked that I was looking back. I was like, oh, okay, that looks cool. Okay, that looks cool. And so just wanted to kind of go over some of these here. But again, it didn't have I've kind of already talked about it before. Where are they going to show Final Fantasy VII because Part 3 remake? Because that's the one that I will that's like the main game that I'm really really looking forward to. There's other stuff that I am looking forward to and all that, but I could basically like no more games and then just that one there, and I would kind of be okay with that. Kind of. It's just for everything I've already talked about, right? And all where I'm at with my video game habits. But we didn't get that, and I didn't think we would. I felt it. I feel like it's too early, and I know that there's been a lot of like speculation, and they're kind of teasing it and all that. It's right around the corner, but I just felt it was too early. The nice thing though is that it's a game that I know exists. It's not like oh, that does exist. Like, does a Final Fantasy 9 remake exist? It's like maybe, maybe not. Who knows? You don't know. Does Half-Life 3 exist? Maybe, but this one we know exists. And so it's just a matter of when they're going to release a trailer, right? Not ifs, because again, it's in the works. It's something that exists. So I'm still betting on that it'll be revealed sometime after the Switch 2 and Xbox versions get released of the first Final Fantasy remake. Again, I'm not really basing that on not much. It just seems right. I mean, I guess I can show it earlier to build up the hype, right? And then also like, hey, if you get them on the Switch 2 and the Xbox, this is what you get too eventually, right? But I don't know. That's just what seems right in my head. Um, but there was definitely some cool stuff though. So I'll just kind of run through these here a bit. But probably the one that got my interest the most, I mean, as far as like what it could be, because we don't know a whole lot about it. But then it was the very first announcement that they made was the Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic. And so they were showing the trailer, right? And pretty early on, I was like, okay, this is Star Wars. And what they were showing, it looked like it might have been in-game graphics. I'm not sure. But it looked really stunning and detailed enough for what they were showing. But it shows like what it seems to be like a female Jedi on a on a spaceship of some sort, and then you land on this planet, and then she just kind of walks out, and honestly, I forgot what happens. But then at the very end, you hear like a lightsaber, right, and all. You see a close up of her eyes, and also immediately I was like, okay, yeah, it is Star Wars. But the thing that has, I think, a lot of people excited about this is that it's being either directed or created or he's producing it or whatever, but Casey Hudson. And when they announced his name, I was like, Casey Hudson, who is that? I was like, that sounds so familiar. So I Googled it really quick, while I was watching the show. And he ends up being one of the main directors or creators again behind Knights of the Old Republic and the Mass Effect series. Well, I don't know if he did all three, but he's behind. He had a hand in the original trilogy of Mass Effect. So that's a very good company, right? And also, I mean, if he still has the props, right, and all to do what he did on those series there, then that makes me excited for this one. So again, Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic is what it's being called. And if it's any way, shape, or form kind of tied to the Knights of the Old Republic or anything to that extent, I am actually very excited about that because there's been so many rumors, right? And all that, the Knights of the Old Republic, is it getting a remake? Is it on life support or what's going on with it? And that still might be the case. But because we already have Knights of the Old Republic, it exists, and I'm happy if that's the only version we ever get of that. Like, it doesn't need to be remade or not. So if we get like a sequel of some sort or something kind of set in the same style, but a brand new next gen RPG of some sort, then I am all for it. Now, I don't know if it is an RPG. Again, they just showed like this quick little cinematic trailer, but because Casey Hudson is behind it, that leads me to believe that it'll be kind of like an RPG, right? But again, I don't know for sure. But either way, it definitely has my interest. But then the big reveal, though, I guess you can say, was because they were teasing it a lot with the statue that was out in the desert and they gave some coordinates to it. I wasn't following that story a whole lot, but there was a lot of speculation as to what it could be. But I mean, people that are in the know, they pretty much pinned it down that it was going to be something to do with Larian Studios and the Divinity series that they got going on. Because then they have like, what, two Divinity games? And these games are kind of like computer style RPGs. And yeah, and sure enough, it's a game just called Divinity. I think maybe it has a subtitle. I'm not sure, but it was a cinematic trailer that they showed, so it's not like in-game stuff. And the trailer itself was, I mean, it was kind of cool, kind of gruesome, but it was pretty cool. Yeah, but really doesn't give you an indication of what the actual game's gonna look like. But again, it's gonna be more in line with like the Baldur's Gate 3, Divinity, Original Sin games, and all. And so, I mean, it's not something I'm super hyped for, but I know that that kind of RPGs and all has a big fan base, so that's cool for them if it's something they're interested in. But they also showed a trailer for Control Resonant. So it seems to be in the same world as the Control games. And so this is from Remedy Entertainment or Remedy Studios. But these are the guys behind the Control game, the Alan Wake games, and also the original Max Payne games. This one, though, seems to have melee combat in it, which is interesting as they're usually more known for like their gunplay. But yeah, I mean, it looks cool. People seem to be excited about it. So yeah, I mean, I haven't played Control yet, nor Alan Wake 2. So I'm a bit behind on some of their more modern games. But for what it is, I mean, it looks cool. But then other two announcements that were released which were probably my second favorite announcements besides the Fate of the Old Republic announcement. But it was so we're getting two Tomb Raider games. So one in 2026, which is Tomb Raider Legacy of Atlantis. And what that is, it's like it's a remake, a definite remake of the original Tomb Raider game. So not the 2013 one. We're going way back to the 1996 one, right? Where the original one that debuted on the Sega Saturn and on the PlayStation and then the Sega Saturn, and they're remaking that one. And I mean, it looks pretty stunning. So I mean, I know remakes, too many of them and all, but I mean, it looks pretty stunning for what it is, right? And I've always felt that of the Tomb Raider games that I've played, I know I've liked several of them, but I always feel like the first one had the best foundation, like the best framework. I just feel like the level design or the levels that you go to, the scenarios that you go to, and all that, then you end up in Atlantis and all. I feel like that was all very done really cool, and so we already had a really good remake back in, no, I don't know, 2005, 2006 or so, I think, and maybe 2007. And so that it was a reboot of the first one. It was remake, but they're remaking it again, and so. But like I said, it looks cool, so I'm curious about it. That comes out next year in 2026. In 2027, we're getting a brand new Tomb Raider game called Tomb Raider Catalyst. Again, they showed what seems to be kind of more of a cinematic trailer for it and all, but I mean, it looks cool. So, I mean, it's another Tomb Raider game. And I mean, those games have usually done pretty well. I really enjoyed the trilogy that came out. What was it? Tomb Raider, Rises of the Tomb Raider, and then Shadow of the Tomb Raider. All very excellent games. So if it's anything like in that vein right there, but better, more advanced and all that, then cool. I'm all for it. Then we got Ace Combat 8, which actually looked kind of interesting. Ace Combat 8, I don't know. I've played like I think there was one on the PlayStation 2, I think, that I kind of got into, and they're pretty cool games and all. But I can't say I'm too very familiar with them. But this one here, I mean, again, a lot of cinematics that they were showing and all, but it looks interesting. So I kind of like have a side eye on it, not my full eye, my both eyes, but a side eye on it. Like, oh, that looks kind of cool. But yeah, it looks impressive. Phantom Blade Zero is a action game from China, I believe, that seems to have been getting a lot of buzz, and they showed off a trailer here, which looks pretty cool. And then they showed a trailer for Resident Evil 9 Requiem. And to nobody's surprise, Leon is in it. It kind of seemed like it was speculated a lot that he was going to be in it, and sure enough, he makes his appearance here. And yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed these more modern Resident Evil remakes, or remakes in new games. So starting with Resident Evil 7, 8, and 9, and then the remakes of 2, 3, and 4. I mean, they've all been excellent. So yeah, I'm interested in this game. Looks creepy too. So something that will probably scare the shit out of me. Hopefully, if I get to play it in February, I think is when it comes out. And then there was a big announcement what seemed the big announcement for Mega Man Dual Override. And so it's just a quick trailer that they showed, and they showed a little bit what seems gameplay. And it seems 2D. It seems kind of like, well, 2.5D. So kind of like what they did with the Mega Man 11 game. But it was just a quick teaser trailer that they shows. Part of it kind of looked a little simplistic, but we'll see. I mean, it's a new Mega Man game, and it's not coming out until 2027. So there's a lot of work that's still going to need to be done on it. So for what it's worth, right, and all, it's I mean, it looks interesting. So hopefully it'll be just a good Mega Man game, right? A good 2D Mega Man game, anyways. But yeah, that's, I mean, like I said, there was other announcements, and I'm sure maybe there was some other stuff too also that might have caught my interest. That's just some of the things that I, was able to pick up on that seemed pretty cool. And so just wanted to make a mention of those there as, some stuff to look forward to. And again, a lot of things that were missing. There's some speculation as to why Half-Life 3 wasn't shown, because I mean, it seemed like it was kind of a sure bet, but it seems to be potentially and again, these are just things that I saw online, but that the Steam machine, they're not ready to announce the price. So that could be part of it, that maybe they don't want to, you know, show off the game, while there's possible controversy with the price. Part of why they might have not been able to show the price, it could be due to the whole thing that's going on with RAM shortages and all that. So it'll be interesting to see if they do actually end up announcing this at some point soon. From what I saw, I mean, people still think it's a thing, but again, they're just kind of trying to wait until Half-Life, Steam announces what they're doing with the Steam machine as far as the price goes and all. And that seems to make sense, right? Because whatever the price is going to be, I'm going to assume that it's not going to be where people wanted it to be. It's going to be more expensive. And so I think that they want to really try to control the overall narrative as far as how they're going to announce this and all, because Half-Life 3 getting announced is going to be a big deal. And so I'm sure they want to have some kind of control over it. But, yep, that's what I got on this here. It was, like I said, it was an interesting show. Oh, and one other thing, too, that caught my interest was, I know some people might have thought it was cheesy, but I actually kind of am interested in it, and it's the Street Fighter movie. They brought the cast out, which, a lot of times when they bring the cast out on a movie and all, it just, like, especially like something that's video game related, it's all kind of cringe-like. But the movie itself, the little trailer that they showed, I'm like, I am kind of interested in this. I actually think it looks not that bad. It's if it's a little, it's going to be a little cheesy, which is fine. But if it has some kick-ass action in it, give me some kick-ass action, some kick-ass music also, and a plot that makes sense. It doesn't have to be, Oscar worthy or anything, but just a plot that makes sense. And I think we could be in for a pretty good time. So yeah, let's see. I'm pretty interested in that. So we'll see how that goes though. But I think it comes out next year, I believe. But either way, that's what I got here for as far as for the Game Awards went. Overall, a decent show. But a lot of things that weren't there, but some pretty good announcements too. So, could have been worse for sure. But with that out of the way, now let's start getting into modern gaming news here. And so, actually, before I get into that, one thing that I made myself a little reminder here. So I'm going to try to do the best I can on this. And sometimes I'll go back and listen to some of the previous episodes that I've done just to try to see if there's anything I can improve on and whatnot. And one thing that I really want to try to start doing is stop saying "and all that." But after a lot of sentences that I'm saying, I finish it off with "and all that." So I'm going to try to lessen the amount of times I say that and all that. So one of the, if I said it before on this and all, but just sort of to reiterate, I'm really doing this I'm coming into my little office space here and just start recording. And I mean, I make some notes, but nothing too crazy. And I'm just, excuse me, and I'm just talking. So there's very minimum editing that I do. And part of the reason that I'm doing this also is, first of all, I would love to learn to like how to edit and, make more, I guess, higher quality stuff. But my time is a bit limited and all, where really I just come in here and just sort of just talk, right, and all, and then boom, there, that's it, right? That's all I got. And part of it is just because some of the things that I enjoy listening to is just, people freeform speaking. And then also another part of it too is one thing that I've felt I've struggled with before for many, many years is just my I mean, I can speak obviously, but I guess the clarity on how I'm saying things and how I'm sort of articulating myself that I feel like I've struggled with a lot. And so part of the reason I'm doing this is to sort of help me just express my thoughts out where I'm just talking, right, and all without having to rely on notes or a script or anything like that. And so that's a big part of the reason here. So that's why it's kind of like, what I say is what comes out and what gets recorded, basically. I'll do minimum editing every now and then. But other than that, I mean, like I said, I'm just kind of talking here and all. So again, I'm gonna try to eliminate that as much as possible. There's probably some other things that I'm saying too that I probably shouldn't be saying as much, using a lot of like filler words or phrases. So I'm going to try to be catching them as much as I can to not say them as much. But that's one that I kept hearing over and over that I was like, okay, that's driving me kind of crazy. So, so that's going to be one goal that I'm going to have here. But for modern gaming stuff, I have a few things here that I wanted to discuss. First thing is there's this game that I saw announced, might have been almost a year ago or so. And it caught my interest. I was like, what is this? This looks interesting. And it seemed like a combination between like something like Guacamelee with that Blasphemous game, but with a sort of like Day of the Dead sort of vibe to it. And it's called Mariachi Legends. And so they released I forgot the name of the developer, but they released a trailer recently, and like an updated trailer look at the game, and it looks amazing. And the trailer that they released, it's set to this music. If you know any Spanish music, it's called La Llorona. For anybody that isn't familiar with Spanish music, so it's an old classic Spanish song. And if you ever watched the movie Coco, that came out from Disney some years ago, it features that song too. Also, so you might have heard it there if you've watched that movie. But yeah, this game looks stunning. The pixel artwork on it just looks amazing, and it's kind of like, again, a combination of like Guacamelee in terms of like its themes and setting and all that. Has a lot of like very Mexican inspired artistry and background and all that. But with the art style though of like Blasphemous, where it's very kind of dark and pixel, and it has this really cool pixelated look and all. And yeah, and it seems to be like a Metroidvania of some sort. It looks like it comes out next year. So yeah, that definitely has my interest. If you get a chance, look up the trailer. It's really quite stunning looking. So I'm pretty excited about that one there. But we also got some releases on the Nintendo Switch Online, and some pretty decent ones actually too. So these were actually pretty cool. Sometimes when they release games, I mean, I'm all for, like I said, any game that gets released on there just to have some version of playing a game. I just wish that they would release some more obvious games, right? And they have to an extent, but I feel like there's still some missing. But we did get some decent ones though. So for the Nintendo Switch Online, for the Nintendo 64, we're getting Rayman 2 and Tonic Trouble on December 17th. And Rayman 2 is pretty good. I played a little ways into it. I played the Dreamcast version though, which is going to be a more better looking version and runs at a higher frame rate. But the Nintendo 64 one though it still looks very playable and all. And it's a cool little 3D platformer, probably one of the better ones from back in those early days of the fifth generation. Because this one was kind of a late release on the Nintendo 64, if I recall, because it came out eventually on the Dreamcast. Oops, dropped the mic there. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty cool game and all, and I mean, obviously it's different from its 2D counterpart games, for the Rayman series. But yeah, I mean, that's a good addition there to the Nintendo 64. And Tonic Trouble, I don't know. I remember hearing about this game back in the day, but I don't know too much about it. But from what it looks like, it almost seems like it was. I think I heard something that it was like a prototype game or something for what Rayman would have been, something to that extent. I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, it's another 3D platformer that looks pretty decent. So, it's cool that we're getting those. But then later on, I mean, I think the announcement came later on, but we got a new game on the GameCube app for the Nintendo Switch Online, and that's Wario Land. And how Nintendo's rolling this out, it's weird. They just kind of like shadow drop things and all. It's like, oh, okay, cool. We're getting Rayman 2 and Tonic Trouble on December 17th, but here's Wario Land on the Nintendo GameCube. It's like, oh, okay. I mean, it just kind of got shadow dropped. And this one was a pretty cool announcement because I played Wario Land back in the day on the Nintendo GameCube. And I had read in a magazine, I think I want to say it was Play Magazine, that they talked about it, that it was a pretty fun game, and it was developed by Treasure, so that had my interest on it. So I remember I bought the game back in the day, and yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun. It's one of my more favorite GameCube games, and it's just it's kind of like a platformer slash beat 'em up, I guess you can say, but has just a lot of funny like moments in it and all. Wario, he's definitely a different character than Mario, and but it's a pretty fun game and all, and with very responsive controls and good level layouts and everything, and kind of that weird silliness also that some treasure games have, but it's still highly creative, and yeah, definitely one of the better GameCube games out there. Honestly, I had a lot of fun with that one back in the day. I don't think I quite beat it back then, but I got a ways into it, and I just remember having a blast with it back then. So yeah, I'm happy that it's on the app now. But and some other news also. Um, so we got some. We got, speaking of shadow drops, we got another shadow drop, and that was for the Elder Scrolls Anniversary upgrade on the Switch 2. So again, with shadow drop, it was what was it, a few days ago, and I remember I woke up and I saw because I think they announced it early in the morning, and I was like, oh, this got announced, for anniversary too. Because I've been wanting a updated version on this on the Switch because I just like playing it portably, and I've had the Switch 2 anniversary edition, which and it plays fine and all that. It's just that it is, I mean, like I said, I can play it just fine and all, but like I've always said before, if there's a way to play it with 60 frames per second and all that, I'm generally going to want to play it that way. If there's not, then there's just not, right? And all, like I said, I can still enjoy a game, but knowing that this game has ran at 60 frames per second on other platforms, it was just kind of always hoping that they would do that on the Switch too. And sure enough, it did. So I was like, oh, sweet. Well, the trailer that it came out, right? It said something about improved resolution, improved load times, and optimized performance, I think, for the Switch or something like that. So I was like, sweet, this is it's probably going to run at 60 frames per second. This is great. And it's going to look better, and all. And so I downloaded it, and then I had to go to work though. But I was kind of excited to play it later on. But then a few things though, as I started realizing some things pretty immediately, was the first thing was that it was like a 53 gigabyte file download size, and I was thinking, that's wow, that's a lot, So I was like, okay, whatever. So I made some room on my Switch, and so left it downloading. And so when I'm driving to work or I'm at work, and all, sometimes I'll be able to watch like some videos on the side, just to have it like background noise as I'm working. And was just pulling up reviews as people were, or first looks at people that were starting to download the game too. And right off the bat, everyone was saying like this only runs at 30 frames per second. I was like, oh, dang it. And so luckily it was because the way they did it is if you have the base Elder Scrolls game, and if you're upgrading, then it's $20, I believe, at least at the time of launch, because I think there was maybe a little bit of a sale on it. But I think if you have the anniversary edition, which I did, and then it's a free upgrade. But if you didn't have any version, then it's a $60, I believe. So I didn't pay anything for it, but I afterwards, right? I booted it up and all, and, because I put it up on my big screen. I just wanted to see like how it would look, and yeah, the texture quality does look nice. I mean, it's starting to look more on par with like what I can see on the Xbox Series One that I have through Game Pass, and I mean, I was like, okay, I mean that that looks nice and all that, but I was like, they really couldn't get this running at 60 frames per second. which again, not the end of the world, and and all, but it just seems a little odd though. Where I mean, the Switch 2, I would assume has the power to do that, but for whatever reason, they didn't optimize it that way. So, it just again, it almost seems like just a cash grab and all, right, for people to upgrade to this version and all, kind of like almost like a spontaneous buy, especially during this time during the holidays. So if that's the case, which seems to be, I mean, that's pretty shady, right? And a lot of those kind of things are the business practices that just is kind of annoying. It's the sloppiness of everything. I mean, I can't really think of another business that gets away with that. I mean, sure, you can if you put out a bad product, I mean that happens, right, in any other business, but it doesn't seem to be as accepted. I mean, if I get a bad product, if I'm buying something, I get a bad electronic or I get a bad mechanical part or whatever, I'm taking it back. I say like, "Hey, this is broken. This or this isn't what I was expecting." Um, if a bad movie comes out, well, it just doesn't really get the sales, right? Yeah. But for games, though, for some reason, I mean, it seems to be more of an accepted practice that, oh, just ship it out and all that. I mean, maybe we'll patch it later. Maybe we'll patch it. And people, we just seem to have accepted that. And that's just really bad practice all the way around. As, I mean, companies are just pretty much for whatever their deadlines they need to hit and all that they can still profit off of knowing that they can ship a broken game, but either they can patch it later or they'll still get the sales for it, right? Which is maybe why this one was shadow drop too. So it's just it's the practice is more what's highly frustrating on these kind of things and all. I can imagine someone bought the game and all kind of on an instantaneous buy because they advertise it as being, optimized performance when in reality it's not. I mean, it runs just the same, maybe slightly smoother than the Switch, but it's still at 30 frames. And so I guess that's the thing. Had they announced that it wasn't optimized for better performance, then that would have been one thing. But they did though, and so it's just lies after lies, and I think that's what has a lot of people frustrated. And like for me, for example, too, where I've talked before, where it's like checking me out on this hobby for like newer stuff just because of these kind of shady practices and all. It's just scummy, and it's I mean, I don't hold like a huge grudge over it, but it's definitely something that it's just like, okay, if this is what we're doing, then it's almost like you go to a business that they just keep putting out bad product or whatever. After like one or two times, it's like, okay, well, this is what you're all about, and all. And so if that's the case, I'm just not going to shop here anymore. And so that's kind of been my attitude now towards games now too. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to keep releasing these broken games, it's just not really starting to become worth my time, basically. So it's unfortunate, but just the state of the industry now. And but I don't know. It's when I was watching the Game Awards. I don't know how much things will change. I would hope they would. I think that this year really set an example of what gaming should be. But I mean, I don't still think I think some changes will be made, but I don't think it'll be on a very grand scope still, unfortunately. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but what I'm getting at is that this year saw a lot of like the major games that were becoming the highly regarded, critically acclaimed games, and did financially pretty well and all. Were games from like small studios with big ideas, very original, and well produced products. So you take games like Clear Obscure, the obvious winner of this year, but then also like Hollow Knight Silk Song, from what it seems like Hades 2. Um, a lot of the indie games that came out, like Blueprints. What was some of the other ones? Um, I can't think of them for some reason right now. But anyways, you know a lot of the games that came out this year, right? And all they were just highly regarded and all. And a lot of them, again, coming from small budgets, well optimized and all that, right? I mean, some of the games might have had like little hiccups here and there, but nothing major, right? And not only that, like for example, like Claire Obscure, they won excuse me, the game of the year and all. And then a little bit later, they released a trailer saying like a thank you trailer for, I guess for supporting their game. And then also have like this big update that gives you like a new area, new costumes, a photo mode, and a bunch of other stuff. And so it's like cool, that's and I think for free. I believe I could be wrong on that, but I believe it's all for free. And so it's like if these companies that are doing it that are smaller in scale and all, now I guess their overhead budget and all that, right, is probably not going to be as much as like some of these bigger companies, I would assume, right? I don't know for sure, but it just seems like smaller companies that are doing this and all. Then I mean, it definitely just seems like so many video game companies now have become corporatized to the extent that they really don't care how much they're screwing you over, right? Because they're still going to be making money. And it's like that loss of like soul and identity to the video game industry that I used to know before and all. It's what's unfortunate because video game companies were pretty big. Because even going back, like, let's say 15 years ago or so, well, roughly about 15 years ago or so, when you started seeing things go a little south, but let's say going back a little bit past that. So let's say 20 years ago or so. So like, let's say 2005, when a lot of like when the seventh generation system started coming out, we were having our big budget games and all that come out and all. And, yes, they had to be patched to an extent and all, but everything still felt like there was still, like they were still catering to gamers and all, right? And like, I mean, what would like some of the big budget games that were coming out at that time, like, I don't know, like the Gears of War, the Call of Duties that were starting to become big, and like those kind of franchises and all, where it still felt like big budget, right? And all, but like cool ideas, um, it didn't seem like they were trying to screw you over with these very malpractices. Like, I mean, like things like microtransactions and all that were starting to become a thing, but it still felt though, right, like a very unique experience, right, to get into the hobby of video games. But just as the year started going on, it just gets more and more corporatized in a way where everything's just starting to feel more hollow and all, and with the big budget stuff and all. So a lot of again, this year was, I feel like this year, at least for gamers, it was a very pivotal year in saying, no, this is what we like. Games like Clair Obscur, games like Hollow Knight Silk Song, games like Hades 2, that aren't these big budget, blown out games and all, but are very fun, very unique, very captivating, and doesn't rely like on shady microtransactions and all. And even for like live service stuff and all, I don't know a whole lot about this and all, but it seems like games like Arc Raiders and all that is doing really well. I mean, it's going to have some of that live service stuff on there and all, because again, those games do have an audience for a reason. But from what I understand, I could be wrong on this, but it seems like they have the way they are distributing the game and monetizing the game and all that, it seems to be more consumer friendly. I could be wrong on that. I don't know much about Arc Raiders. I just know that it seems to be a really popular game, and for a lot of reasons. So I would assume that's kind of the case. So there's definitely ways to do it. It's just a matter of just companies aren't really wanting to do that, and I think a lot of it just has to do that the people making the decisions nowadays aren't gamers or developers themselves. They're just business minded people, and so I feel like we're losing a lot of that. But anyways, just all I had on my notes on this particular segment was just Elder Scrolls on Switch 2, so didn't mean to go off a little bit there, but just, the state of the way things are nowadays, and, it just is what it is. Um, and we'll get into a little bit more of that on another little thing that I wanted to talk about here, but moving on from that, though, we did have some sales figures that came out for what happened during Black Friday. So this was interesting. So the so during Black, so what I understand, prior to Black Friday, I think like the week before, so it looked like the Switch 2 was doing pretty good. Um, I think I forgot what they said. I think was the PS5 number one, and then the Switch 2 number two, or something like that. I forgot. But after Black Friday, so Matt Piscatella is, I see his name pop up a lot in a lot of videos and all that, people reference him as he seems to be some kind of a data guy, and so he's seems like he's a pretty reliable dude with a lot of the sales figures and data figures that he comes out for the video game industry, and he might do some other stuff, I'm not sure, but basically he came out with some figures here, and so going over like what sold. the most right out of the major video game companies during Black Friday. And so the PlayStation 5 sold at about 47% of the sales for video game consoles. So pretty impressive. From what I understand, I haven't really been keeping up with too much of this stuff, but from what I understand, is that the PlayStation systems usually do good on Black Friday, and I think it's maybe because they're just a more expensive system. So if you can get a deal on it, I think that's why people would probably gravitate more towards that than say like the Switch, because the Switch generally in the past hasn't been that expensive, right? So I think people are just kind of more, trying to get that deal on that more expensive product. Where in December, from what I heard, is that that's generally when Nintendo had done better, right? Where more of an impulse buy during the holidays, when people are doing like more last minute shopping. But this year, so again, it was 47% for the PlayStation 5. The Switch 2 had 24%. So not horrible, I guess, from what's generally been considered, but, seems like it kind of took a bit of a dip on it. But what caught everyone off guard, and I thought this was funny, right? And I'll get into it here in a bit, but the system that placed in third was an Xbox. Xbox, from what it sounds like, didn't make much of a bleep as far as um, being noteworthy, right, for how much it sold during this Black Friday season. Because from my understanding, they didn't even put it on their Xboxes on discount. But what came in at number 3 was a small little cube thing called Next Playground. And when I saw that, I started laughing. I was like, that is funny that thing is taking off. So so if you don't know what this Next Playground is, you might have seen it out there and all. Like if you started looking at some of these things, like what is this Next Playground? And so you might have heard about it. I don't know if you've already watched some videos on this and all, but basically it's like this small little cube thing that has a camera on it, and it has kind of like a weird like light kind of turquoise green color with a yellow color and all. And so if you don't know what it is, I actually own one, and it's basically like like a mini version of a Kinect. And I bought it for one of my daughters. What was it? Last year, I believe, or was it this year? Earlier this year. It was for one of their birthdays. God, I'm starting to lose track of what I got them for their birthdays and all. But I got it for them because it's basically it's like the small little cube, right? And all, and it was just because I was just googling like ideas, right, for my daughters and all, what to give them like as a like their main gift. And so basically, what it is that it has these games on there, and it's all. I mean, think of like the Kinect. Basically, it's got a camera. It's all motion controlled, right, and all as it's reading your body image and all that. And it just has like games like Fruit Ninja. There's like this filter game that they like playing on there and all. And so the point of it is that your kids are playing, but they're very active in it, right? Because they're jumping around, and all, and like there's this whack-a-mole game, right, where they're whacking these moles and all, and but they're actually moving their hands, or like this filter game and all. There, again, they just they look silly, right, with their as they're moving around, and you can pick a bunch of different filters, and so but they're very active in it, and so that's the point of it, right? Is that your kids are kind of getting, I guess you can say, like screen time, but while they're being highly active in it. And so you buy a subscription to it, which can be a little pricey. And again, the whole subscription model, but is what it is. But I did cave and bought them like an year's worth of subscription on it to have a bunch of games on there. And they actually love it. I mean, it's actually worked out kind of great. Where I just need them to burn off some energy and all. Although they get a little too hyper sometimes with it, and also sometimes I'm like, okay, like I'm cutting this off because you girls are just getting like all over the place. But that's just the joy of having kids and all that. But they also enjoy it a lot though, right? And so that's why for me it was a worthwhile investment, because it gets your kids moving around, jumping around, and they have a blast with it. And also it's also kind of funny watching them play, and just seeing them smile and play and all that. It's always a good thing. So for me, it was a little worthwhile investment, and I think it cost like $250 or so. Because I did buy it at the normal price when I got it. Like I said, it was last year, this year, early this year, I forgot when. But anyway, so for anyone that has kids, yeah, I do recommend it. It's very easy to set up. It's very simple. And that's all it is, right? You're just uh um you know, it's very user friendly and all, and again, the kids will love it and all. Especially like if you take them to like, if you ever taken them to like Chuck E. Cheese and like playing some of those games that are on there, right? And all that are more like, like for example, like Fruit Ninja, for example, right? Then I think they'll get a kick out of it. Again, the only downside is that it is subscription based because it comes with a few free games on there. So if your kids end up liking the free games that are on there, then just stick with that. If you do get the subscription, it gives you a decent amount of games, and they do add new stuff, but I believe they do take away stuff also. So that again is a bit of a bummer. And I want to say I think I paid like 80 or 85 bucks for an annual subscription, so it wasn't cheap. So just go into it knowing that. But if it's something that feels like it's within your range and all to do and all, I would say try it out and then just don't get the subscription service first. See if they like the free games that it comes with, and if they get into it and all, then then yeah, maybe it might be worth looking into getting the subscription. So just again, if you have young kids and all, at least for my kids and all, and then sometimes like their friends have come over and cousins and all, and they have a blast with it because my I have some family members also that they got it for their kids and they seem to love it too as well too. So again, it's like great for parties and and also just again if you just need your kids to burn off steam, it's a kind of a blast. And also it has like some fitness stuff there as well too. So you might even get into it for that as well. It's where I'm assuming you're using like your body motion and all because it's pretty accurate from what I've messed around with it a bit. I'm like, okay, because like one of my daughters, she's younger, and so she's not the most coordinated as far as like when it tells you like to raise your arm so it can read your movements and all, and she kind of is all over the place, but it still reads her movements and all. So I was pretty impressed with just the technology on it. But anyways, yeah, that's kind of what the next playground is, right? And so anyway, so it ended up coming in at number 3 with 14% of the sales. And so, from what it seems like, why it did so well was, this is just speculation, right? But basically, Xbox is really not doing a whole lot now, right? So I don't think a whole lot of people are interested in the Xbox, and it also, from what I heard, their systems weren't discounted. Another possibility too, also, and this is maybe something that Nintendo should start considering, was it that it ate into some of Nintendo's sales? Because if you're taking like just your casual parent, right? Because it seems like what made this next playground really blow up was it seems like it was like just moms talking on TikTok and just like, hey, what is this new device? Should I recommend, should I get it for my kids? And a lot of moms, providing their feedback on it. Like, yeah, like my wife, for example, she loves it for her kids. And so I can see her, like, for example, recommending it to other moms and such. And that's kind of what made it blow up. And so again, you're taking away from the Nintendo market, or at least some of it anyways, right? Because normally before, if you wanted something cheap, something for kids and all that, most people were going to gravitate towards a Nintendo, right? So in the previous years, right, the Nintendo Switch, for example, or back in the day, right, when Nintendo had like a handheld, dedicated handheld. But now, in this holiday season, yeah, I mean, the Switch is still out there, right? But it's starting to get a little old. And so the Switch too, ooh, 450, not quite, the as cheap as Nintendo systems used to be. But what is this next playground, right? Oh, okay. Well, this looks kind of like something cool, fairly cheap, and all that for the kids, right? Um, Just reminds me of some video. This old lady that used to, she had like a YouTube channel, or like it was like her kids or her grandkids or something like that would film her, and she would be cooking some random food, just basically throwing whatever into the skillet and cooking it. And so then her kids would ask her, hey, auntie, or hey, grandma, what is it that you're cooking? She's like, some serious shit for the kids. So anyway, it just kind of reminded me of that. So it's just some game system for some shit for the kids. But that's, I think that was a big part of the appeal of this and all, is that again, it's catering to that casual market that Nintendo used to own, but maybe not so much anymore, right? I mean, it's not like it outsold the Switch too, but it definitely ate into some of the sales, right? So again, was it because of that? I don't know for sure. It's just possibility, right? Um, but uh, but yeah, it was just kind of interesting though. Oh, excuse me. Um, but another thing too, also that I heard, and so I saw one video on it. So, but it, they had been, and this is just what I saw this one guy talk about, but so fairly recently, I guess it's been about a year now, where they released the Legacy of Kain package, where it had Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, and then Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 2, I believe, was in that packet. and it was a cool little package deal, right? And all where it has like the original, the two games, right, with like the original graphics and then also more modern graphics. So kind of like what they did with the Tomb Raider games, the ones that were back on the PlayStation One. So it was the original games, but then they kind of you can upres the graphics and all to look a little bit more detailed and resolution and frame rate and all that. So it was a cool little thing, right? That's an awesome series. That's the Legacy of Kain series. They're really great games. I mean, as games themselves, they're pretty good. They play pretty well, but the stories to them and all that are just amazing. And it's just an awesome world that they created with these Legacy of Kain games. Well, this one dude was talking about how I guess it was on some report or something. Well, no, let's go further back. There was a survey that I think Crystal Dynamics did. Maybe it was them that trying to like gauge interest in the series. Like, would you like to see a Legacy of Kain reboot or something like that, right? And so it looks like it kind of seemed like usually when companies do that, it's because they're trying to feel out, right? Like, hey, you guys still interested in the series? And especially if they release like a remaster of some sort of a game from that series. So kind of like what happened with Legacy of Kain. And so there was a lot of speculation that there was going to be some kind of a new game in this series or like a big budget remake or something to that effect. Well, according to this video that I saw, it looks like whatever that was canceled. And if that's the case, oh, that sucks. Again, the Legacy of Kain games have so much potential to them. And they're just, I mean, they're basically like action adventure games and all, but at least the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver is kind of like it's like a Metroidvania and a fairly well done one too. Also for when it came out, like back in what 1999, I think, or 1998. And again, the stories to them are very cool, very gothic, vampire lore, medieval sort of settings to them. I mean, Raziel and Kain are just some of the coolest characters ever. And so, anyways, if that's the case, if something was being planned and got canceled, that is a bit of a bummer because that was pretty cool. But if you haven't, though, check out that new Legacy of Kain remasters that came out last year because those are pretty good. But there's also a game that was announced. It's called Starship Troopers Ultimate Bug War. Seems to be some kind of a first person shooter kind of. It seems to be sort of a, what are they calling them now, like boom shooters. So kind of like retro-ish a little bit. The graphics look a little pixelated and all, but I love the movie Starship Troopers. And so that if we're getting any kind of a game that's a first-person shooter where you're just killing a bunch of these bugs, and all, alien bugs, that sounds awesome. That sounds like a really good time. So I'll keep my eye on that one. And on the trailer, it has the actor, Casper Van Dien, I think is his name, who was in the original Starship Troopers, doing kind of talking about the game and all. I was like, this is awesome. If it comes out good, I'm all for it. I've actually been happy that they've been able to do some really cool video games off of like older movies, like science fiction or action movies from back in the day. It just kind of warms my nostalgic 80s action, violent, gory movie heart. um, and so like I said, if it's a pretty good movie, it's or I'm sure I'm sorry, if it's a pretty good game, then that's pretty cool because it looks to take the aesthetics and all that of the movie, which the movie came out in sometime in the 1990s, I believe. But if you've never seen it, there was actually several Starship Trooper movies that came out. It was the first one that was more popular, I guess. I don't know to the quality of the other ones. There were more like B-rated movies and all, but I think some of them might be somewhat decent. But the first one was it's just a lot of fun. It's funny because it starts off a little cheesy at first, right? But then it gets highly gory, and so it's like, okay, so this is sort of like a satire, right, and all. But it's a very entertaining movie, and just a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, just it was directed by the dude that did. I think his name is Paul Verhoeven or something like that. And so he did the first RoboCop movie. He might have done some of the other ones, but I know he did the first one and also Total Recall. And if you recall those movies, they're kind of like satires, right? And all where it's like they're kind of cheesy and all that at first and all in certain parts, but then they're highly gory and violent and all. And so they're just very entertaining watches, basically. But yeah, so kind of excited about that. But speaking of, I'm getting better with my segues here. Speaking of games that were adapted from some kind of a movie property. So I've been looking forward to this game, the Terminator 2D No Fate. Tommy, Terminator 2 is just one of my, even to this day, one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm a huge fan of like the Terminator and Terminator 2, and really Terminator lore overall. Unfortunately, a lot of the later movies, I mean, there's some okay ones, and then there's just some downright horrible ones. But just the Terminator property as a whole, I feel like it has so much potential, and those first two movies are just some of my favorite movies of all time. And there's been some okay video games. Actually, one really good one was Terminator Resistance. I will keep recommending that game. It is basically the part three that we should have gotten in the movies. It's that good as far as like, and then the game is pretty good too. Also, it's a first person shooter. It's with some like adventure elements to it, where it's not just shooting. But the story to it and all is really well done, and also Terminator Resistance. If you have any interest in like the Terminator series, and I'll definitely check that game out. But we're talking about the Terminator 2D No Fate, and so it's a 2D game. It's like a running gun for the most part shooter, but it also mixes up like driving sections and all. And it's they released it on this past Friday, and so it's not a long game, and it's not too difficult of a game. So I already beat the game well in the normal setting. And just a blast to play through, though. And I am so happy this game exists. It is very much a nod to the movie, and it even adds new elements to it. So, for example, in the movie, uh, John Connor, Edward Furlong's character, says something like, "Yeah, my mom got arrested for trying to blow up a um, computer factory or something like that." Well, in this game, you play as Sarah Connor going through that part there, right? And then it also has like some expanded future scenes and all that and all. And there you go, saying all that, and some other sections of the movie too. Also, right? It's just so much fun to play through. And again, you'll geek out and all, especially if you're a big fan of the movie. And again, the game plays really well too. Also, there's like one particular section that is very much an homage to Contra 3: The Alien Wars, where you get this hunter killer coming in and bombing the ground and all. And so like that's almost like exactly like in that one scene in the first stage of Contra 3, where you get that airship that comes in and bombs the ground and everything goes to fire, or gets burned. So and then you get the spread gun too also. So it's like, oh damn, I was like, they get it. They get it. So yeah, have a lot of fun with it and all. It's so there's the thing, right, and all, that it is $30 and all for a game that you can beat, like, if you're just going through like just beating it one time. I mean, the game is pretty short, maybe 40 minutes if that. But it gives you some incentives to replay the game again and all. And but for me nowadays, it's the experience, and if I'm having fun with it, it's really what it's coming down to. That for me, it's going to make it worthwhile. Like I would buy a game like this almost at a full price tag over like, say, like, I hate to throw this game under the bus, but like let's say Assassin's Creed Shadows. I mean, I look at that game and it has like all this big budget and everything, but it just seems like it has a lot of bloat to it. And I'm like, I would probably spend more, the $60, I don't know if I'd go 70, but on something like Terminator than something like Assassin's Creed, which is, technically longer, more big budget and all that. And again, because for me, what it comes down to is this is a game that I'm going to continuously replay over and over and over, and I'm going to have a fun time playing it each time. Whereas I can imagine a game like this, and again, I might even love Assassin's Creed Shadows. I'm just kind of throwing this game under the bus, but I feel like I would play it for a few hours and I'd be like, I'm done. And so I guess that's just kind of what I go to as far as when I determine value to a video game. I mean, I'm glad it's not $60 because I would have hesitated buying it at that price. But well, I think actually if you get the physical edition, I think it is $60. But for $30 for like a trip down nostalgia lane for playing a game that we probably should have gotten way back in the day when the movie first came out, it was worth it for me, right? And it's so amazing. The music to it too. Also, it is, when I first heard that, I think it's that Dwight Yoakam song, the country song, and then "Bad to the Bone" by George Thorogood, I believe, the singer, in that bar scene. I was like, this is this is awesome. You've just taken me back to 1991 when I was a kid, and I was so obsessed with this movie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And yeah, but again, it's not just a nostalgia talking, right? And all, it's a very solid running gun shooter, and with excellent pixel art graphics, great controls, great music outside of like the licensed music and all, but the way they use Brad Fiedel's songs and kind of do their own mixes with it, it's really stunning. So just a cool overall package, and it's kind of like the sequel to the Terminator Sega CD game that we should have gotten back in the day. Uh, yeah, again, I really highly recommend it. I understand if you feel like that might be a little bit too expensive for you, especially during this time of the year and all that. But if you all that, there you go. But if you have any interest in it and all, I feel like it's you will get some entertainment on it. So at the very least, maybe wait for the sale. But I feel like you would have a really good time with it if you are into these kind of games. Um, but let's see. The last thing I wanted to talk about here is so probably like the big news story, I guess you can say, outside of like the Game Awards stuff. But that was for this whole thing about Netflix acquiring Warner Brothers. And so, you know, that, and now this is kind of more movie related, but it does affect video games and a lot of favorite video game properties too. So that's why I wanted to touch base a little bit on this. I don't have a whole lot of insight on this and all outside of just some of the things that I saw. So, but it is interesting on what it could mean though. So now, from my understanding, and it's not finalized because I think Paramount is still trying to do their bid on it too, also. But really quick, just kind of what it means for movies is so Netflix, obviously, right, and all their streaming service where they used to do DVDs and all that, but you know, since the world has gone away from starting to get away from physical media in general, they started doing the streaming thing, and obviously, they're like the main name when it comes to streaming services. So much so that so many things get called now it has a Netflix model whenever you're talking about something that is subscription based. You know, for example, like if you do Blue Apron for food, oh, it's like the Netflix model, right? You're subscribing to a service and all, but you know, but which you can cancel and all that, and you know the whole subscription thing. It just seems to be par for the course now, right? For so many different things now. But Netflix is sort of the godfather of that all, and so within the movie industry, there's been a lot of main or big directors and people in the industry and all that have been against this because because they're feeling like it's kind of the death of cinema and even like the death of physical media because Netflix again is a very streaming service minded company. And from what I understand, the whatever his name is, the main CEO or owner or whatever, right, in all of this company, has been somewhat vocal about saying that cinema is dead, right? Like it's nobody's really going to the theater anymore and all that. Everything is subscription based, and to watch at home and things like that. So the fact that they would be buying Warner Brothers, which is one of the biggest movie industries out there, or publishers out there, it has a lot of people concerned, right? That a lot of the movies that Warner Brothers would want to produce aren't going to be shown in theaters or not for that long. So he has come out saying again, right, and all that. No, I'm still going to put movies out in theaters and all, but a lot of people aren't buying it. That he's gonna, I guess, keep to his word. So that's why there's a big concern with this, and as far as like movies go where again Paramount is trying to come in saying like, hey, we are not going to do that and all, because Paramount is still also more, where they still have their movies out in theater and all that. There I go, all that. So what does that mean for video games? So Warner Brothers, so they have some pretty big names when it comes to video games. Admittedly, some of these studios haven't really produced a whole lot more recently, but they've had some big hits in the past. And I mean, we're talking like a lot of money. Like I think I heard something in the billions of dollars, like overall what all these companies have produced in the past. And so just to kind of give a bit of a rundown, so there's like Warner Games, Rocksteady, NetherRealms. So well, going back, Warner Games, I think so. I want to say I think that they would be doing. Oh, I don't know. It's licensed properties of like Warner Brothers games and all. Like, I don't think they're like the main developers, but they're like at least the publishers of like things like, let's say, like Harry Potter. So I would think, right, something like that. Rocksteady, well, they were the guys behind the Batman Arkham games. NetherRealms, where they're the dudes behind Mortal Kombat. Monolith, they're the guys that were behind the Shadow of Mordor games. I'm pretty sure. Which and they were also trying to do like a Wonder Woman game too, but that got canceled and all. And so, but they were originally the guys behind the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games. Avalanche, I'm not sure what they've done. maybe the Just Cause games. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't know what they've done. But then Traveler's Tale, which I'm pretty sure are the guys behind the Lego games, which are just a huge hit, right? Um, so if this deal goes through, and again, it's like Netflix is trying to acquire Warner Brothers for like $82.7 billion. So if they acquire them, then that means that they get these gaming studios. And again, whatever the owner is or CEO of this company, he's come out, and this is a quote that I saw that's been kind of floating around, right? That has a lot of people worried, is that he has stated that the games divisions are basically worthless. Quote, saying, "We actually didn't attribute any value to Warner's game studios. They're relatively minor compared to the grand scheme of things." Ouch. Because I mean, again, for video game enthusiasts, those developers there have produced some very beloved games, right? Again, they haven't some of their output hasn't been the best in the past several years, or if they've had any output. But we're talking about like just the Arkham games, for example, the Batman Arkham games. Those have been amazing games and all. Some of the most highly revered games of all time, made a lot of money. And if they acquire this and all, I mean, what's going to happen with these properties? Because it doesn't seem like that they're really going to give it a whole lot of thought. And maybe they will once they kind of figure out, like, hey, this is a moneymaker over here, right? And all it's like maybe you're kind of more of a movie minded person, but these developers are high money makers of some of the biggest properties in video games. And so maybe making, in some cases, maybe even making more money than some of these movies, right, that have been coming out. I don't know for sure, right? I'm just, I just know that Mortal Kombat games, Batman games, the Lego games, and all, just those right there, they've made a shitload of money. And so for them just to kind of say like, man, not that big of a deal. It's like, I think you're overlooking what you have here, but then that's the concern. If you're going to take these very high premier, or at least we're high tier developers at one point, and just sort of toss them off the wayside, or maybe sell them off or whatever, right, they're going to do, then you're just kind of killing a side of gaming there and that is going to be kind of unfortunate. So that is a concern right there, and all across movies and video games and all that. That's why this deal has some people freaking out. Now, that is a very basic explanation of it. So if you have more of an interest in this story, definitely, research it out on your own. And it's an ongoing story. And also, again, because Paramount's trying to get in there might even be a new update outside from the notes that I took on this. But so it is a bit concerning. I haven't really had much hope that there's going to be a whole lot more that's going to be done with the Arkham games. They kind of messed up Suicide Squad. And so, we'll see what happens, I guess. But it is, just on the outset, right, and all, it does, it's concerning. So, we'll see what comes of that. But yeah, that's what I got for modern gaming stuff. So some good stuff, some bad stuff, and all, just like any other time of the year and all. But let's go back though. Let's go travel back in time, and we're going to 1998. Now, 1998, if you followed video games at all, you might know that this is a year that's been considered one of the best years of all time in gaming. So for people that were around this time, I hope this will bring back some nostalgia for you. If you're a newer video game player, but maybe you've heard, yeah, I hear about 1998, it was such a great year, blah, blah, blah. What's the big deal about it? Well, the games that came out during this year are, I mean, as I was making my list here of like some of the games that came out, I'm like, holy crap, there was a lot of good stuff that came out this year. And it was just a very impressive year. And again, at the time, I was like, okay, cool. I mean, yeah, it was a lot of great games and all that, but I don't know if I just really thought back then that I was like, this is going to go down as like one of the greatest years in gaming. Um, so let's talk about 1998, a bit of statistics and all, and then we'll talk about some games. But 1998 saw many sequels and prequels in video games, such as Crash Bandicoot Warp, F-Zero X, Fallout 2, Gex Enter the Gecko, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes, Metal Gear Solid, Panzer Dragoon Saga, Resident Evil 2, Return to Krondor, Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, Street Fighter Alpha 3, and Tomb Raider 3, along with new titles such as Banjo-Kazooie, Dance Dance Revolution, Half-Life, Medieval, Parasite Eve, Radiant Silvergun, Spyro the Dragon, StarCraft, and Xenogears. In Japan, Sega released the Dreamcast, which was the first console of the sixth generation and also the company's last major console. Wah, wah. Oh, Sega. But the year has been retrospectively considered one of the best and most influential in video game history due to the release of numerous critically acclaimed, commercially successful, and influential titles across all platforms and genres at the time. The year's best-selling video game console was the PlayStation for the third year in a row. The year's most critically acclaimed title was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, which remains Metacritic's highest-scoring game of all time. The year's best-selling home video game worldwide was Pokemon Red, Green, Blue, Pikachu for the Game Boy, while the year's highest-grossing arcade game in Japan was Tekken 3. So, yeah, I mean, just reading off those titles there, I'm like, man, that's a lot of quality stuff there. But let's go over some stuff here. So for hardware releases this year, so pretty much from April 14th to November 23rd, there was just a lot of different Game Boy Color variations that came out throughout like Japan and North America and in Europe. And then on November 27th, the Dreamcast came out in Japan. So I'm just going to make little mention of the Dreamcast here because again, I just don't, I don't know how much justice I could do for talking about video game related stuff that was outside of the region, outside of just bullet points that I'm reading, right? I can mainly speak more for like North American stuff. So the Dreamcast I'm going to get more into until next year because that's where again it came out here in the North America and all. But it did come out in Japan though in November 27th though. But for the game of the year, it I mean, it was pretty much Ocarina of Time across the board. That this game was considered like the game of the year for pretty much everywhere. The next one would have been Metal Gear Solid, and we'll get more into that and all. But those were kind of like the two big games. But Ocarina of Time, really though, I mean, that was just it was just a critical darling of a game. I mean, like I said earlier, there, right? It's still the highest rated Metacritic game of all time. Granted, back then I don't think there was as many reviews, and also the newness of something like that, and all highly impacted those reviews and all. Because in some ways the game, I mean, I still think it's amazing, but in some ways the game doesn't quite hold up. But the impact of the Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was amazing. So, and like I said, we'll get more into that later here. But let's see. So for best-selling video game consoles, so number one was the Sony PlayStation. So it sold at 22,500,000. Damn. The Nintendo Game Boy, and the Game Boy Color sold at 12,990,000. Now these figures that I'm giving are worldwide again. Excuse me. For the Nintendo 64, it sold at 7,860,000. The Super Nintendo sold at 1,430,000. The Sega Dreamcast, so again, this is in Japan though, this sold at 900,000. The Sega Genesis sold at 659,000. And the Sega Saturn sold 205,000. So the Genesis outsold the Saturn this year. Wow. That's heartbreaking. I mean, I love the Genesis, but the Saturn, oh man, bro. Damn. Let's see. And then number 8, the Nintendo sold at 50,120. Best-selling video games. So this is combined for worldwide. So Pokemon Red, Green, Blue, Pikachu sold at 7,288,000. Resident Evil 2 sold at 3,493,000. Ocarina of Time, which Ocarina of Time did come out later in the year, and it sold 3,420,000. Gran Turismo sold 3,197,000. Tekken 3 sold 2,479,000. GoldenEye 007 sold at 2,300,000. Metal Gear Solid sold at 1,829,000. Number 8 was Dragon Quest Monsters on the Game Boy Color, sold at 1,660,000. Number 9, Crash Bandicoot sold at 1 million. Crash Bandicoot Warp sold at 1,507,000. Number 10, Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, sold at 1,337,000. So Crash Bandicoot games were, doing pretty decent. Let's see. All right, so then I'll just go over here for the United States here. So let's see. So in the United States, so number one was Pokemon Red and Blue with 1,350. I'm sorry. What? One. Oh my God. 1 million. 135 million. Oh God, I can't read. For Pokemon Red and Blue. The Ocarina. Oh my gosh. Dude. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time sold at 290 million. GoldenEye 007 sold at 135,770,000. Gran Turismo sold at 112,987,000. Resident Evil 2 was number 5, and that sold at 113,043,000. Number 6 was Tekken 3, and this is the PlayStation 1 that sold 93,669,000. Number 7 for Madden, NFL 99 sold at 85,135,000. And so these are dollar values. Sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. And so Metal Gear Solid sold at 99,995,000. Banjo Kazooie sold at 99,912,000, and Super Mario 64 sold at 75,593,000. Highest grossing arcades in Japan. Let's see. So arcades were starting to kind of go by the wayside, but in number one was Tekken 3. Number 2 was Street Fighter 03, known as Street Fighter Alpha 3 here. Number 3 was Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes. Number 4 was the King of Fighters 98. Number 5 was Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle. And let's see, number 6 was the King of Fighters 97. Number 7 was Virtual Striker 2. Number 8 was Cyber Troopers Virtual on Oratorio Tangram. Number 9 was Street Fighter EX2, and number 10 was Virtual Striker version 98. So events. So the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences hosts its first annual Interactive Achievement Awards. Shigeru Miyamoto of Nintendo is inducted into the AIAS Hall of Fame. British Academy of Film and Television Arts hosts the first BAFTA Interactive Entertainment Awards. January 1st, the ESRB changes the KA Kids to Adult rating to E, everyone. March 14th, Sega announces the discontinuation of the Sega Saturn in North America to prepare for the launch of its successor, the Dreamcast. In May 28th, so Bill Williams, designer of Alley Cat, Necromancer, and Mindwalker, passes away. May 28th to 30th, the 4th annual E3 is held in Atlanta, Georgia. Following the show, the inaugural Game Critics Award was held, with winners being titled Best of E3. July 3rd, Daniel Buntenberry, designer of Mule and Seven Cities of Gold, passes away. September 6th, Info Games Entertainment, SA, and Canal launched the Game One television channel. And November 28th, the video game retailer FuncoLand opens its 300th location in Nashville, Tennessee. And December, Take-Two Interactive forms the Rockstar Games publishing label. And December 11th, the final Sega Saturn game released in North America, Magic Knight Rayearth. Oh, that came out all the way in December 11th? Really? Was it that far out that it came out? I thought it was earlier in the year, but okay. Let's see. Businesses. So Activision acquires CD Contact Data and Head Games Publishing. Eidos Interactive acquires Crystal Dynamics. Electronic Arts Inc. acquires Westwood Studios, and they are also acquire North American operations of Virgin Interactive. JTS Corporation, known as basically Atari Corporation, files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Hasbro Interactive acquires the Atari brand and property from JTS in May. They also acquire Microprose in August. Square Company and Electronic Arts form Square Electronic Arts LLC to publish a wealth of Square Company titles in the U.S. Havas a subsidiary of Vivendi, acquires Cedent Software, which includes Sierra Online and Blizzard Entertainment. Lego Media establishes Lego Group, or established by Lego Group, and new companies are Breakaway, Elixir, Metro 3D, Rockstar, Sunrise, Troika, Wild Tangent, Loki, and Retro Studios. Retro Studios. But the funk note is Dwango. Yeah, a lot of game releases here. So I'm kind of scrolling down here, but yeah. So let's get into the games then. Let's get into the games themselves. So starting with the Sega, or actually, let me back up with the Pokemon. So Pokemon, I so yeah, I feel like I have a pretty good knowledge overall of video games, but I have some blind spots. One of the blind spots I have is, well, PC gaming, right? I understand it to an extent and all that, but when it comes to like a lot of the popular like strategy games like Age of Empires or the Sid Meier games and all, like, those are games that I'm just not a lot of familiar with, but I do know that, right, they had a lot of popularity, but a lot of like first person shooters and all that were PC only, or like multiplayer games and all, like Counter-Strike, things like that I'm gonna have a bit of a blind spot for. Other blind spots that I have are like kind of like, I mean, Souls games. I mean, I know them and all. I just don't have a whole lot of like experience playing them. But another big blind spot that I have is the Pokemon games. I know about Pokemon, obviously, but I don't have like, what I don't I was already 18 years old at this time when Pokemon started becoming big. So for me, Pokemon was like kiddie stuff, and nowadays my kids they're not really interested in it and all either. So again, it's Pokemon games I have a big blind spot as far as my own personal experience with, but I know that it was a huge phenomenon, right? And so it started in 1998, at least here in the United States, right? Again, Pokemon had already been coming out in Japan, from what I understand, but here in the United States, we got Pokemon Red and Blue, I believe, this year, and then the following year, 1999, we got Pokemon Yellow. And I just know that these games just absolutely blew up, and they also made the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color relevant again because they were on those systems there. If you're kind of like me and you're like, okay, I know about Pokemon. Everyone knows about Pokemon, but what exactly is Pokemon? So it started off, well, I shouldn't say, I don't know if it started off as a trading card game and all in Japan, but then eventually blew up to be like an anime and then these video games. And they're basically turn-based RPGs, I guess you can say, kind of simplified and all, because again, they're mainly catered to kids. But I think the addicting nature of them is the basic story premise to these games, and also the addicting nature of like catching these monsters, right? So like you have something like a Pokemon ball, you throw it at them, and then you capture them, and then you can use them in battle. That is my very limited knowledge of these games and all. I've messed around a little bit on like some of the Pokemon games, and I was mainly testing them out as I was just going through some emulation devices that I have and all, and testing them out. Uh, but that's going to be about as much as I know. But this is where it started becoming a big deal in the United States, was in 1998. And again, it made the Game Boy systems more, just relevant again and all, when they, had already been out for years. So the Game Boy, so as far as like dedicated handhelds that we had, it was still really the Game Boy, because everything else had already died off, like the Game Gear, the whatever little life the Turbo Express had, or also the Atari Lynx. And the Game Boy was still going strong. It was starting to kind of, die out a bit, but this gave it a whole new life. So Pokemon, I mean, highly nostalgic for a lot of people. I know that. And so I can imagine if you were young during this age, this was probably a pretty big deal. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience on that. Other than that, I just know it's just been a big, even to this day, it's just such a big phenomenon. Um, But the Sega Saturn, though, so we talked about it there. So it looks like they started discontinuing it in, what I say, like in March or so of this year, from what it said there, in North America anyways. And so the Sega Saturn still had some more life in it in Japan, because it was pretty successful in Japan. It wasn't better than the PlayStation, but it had a lot of success over there. And it's just because a lot of the games that it had just kind of catered to that audience there, like a lot of shooters, a lot of, I believe like anime inspired stuff and all. But there was a lot of good stuff that was still coming out. And some of the stuff we even got here in the United States. So there was Radiant Silvergun, which was known to be one of the coolest shooters of the time, like a vertical shooter, and made by Treasure, and really showed that the set what 3D capabilities the Saturn had. And it's a really fun shooter, has a really cool concept where you don't really get power ups. You already start off with like a lot of different weapon styles, and it's very difficult but very challenging, rewarding, fun, and known to be one of the coolest like Saturn games out there. But that one only came out in Japan only though. But it became kind of a cult hit though for a lot of people, even here in the United States, where people were wanting to import it. And there was some other cool games too, also where I don't know if it came out this year, but now that I'm thinking about it, but there was like X-Men versus Street Fighter, Dark Vampire Savior, which is basically Dark Stalkers 3. I think all of those came out this year also, because I remember importing those games, and it had because they would come with the 4 megabit RAM cartridge where it would expand the Saturn's whatever memory, where ultimately what it means is that it could do better animations. And so a lot of these games were pretty much arcade perfect. I mean, for the most part. And so like I remember Vampire Savior 3 and X-Men versus Street Fighter, it looked really stunning with the pretty much arcade perfect animation. It was like, wow, this is awesome. And then also really lessened the loading times as well too. So that was pretty cool. Um, but here in the United States, we did get some games though for the Saturn that yeah, I felt like it went out with a bang. Unfortunately, kind of went under everyone's radar. But we had Burning Rangers, which honestly, this game I don't have a whole lot of experience with, but it's a game by Yuji Naka, done by the Sonic team, and it's a game where you play like some kind of a futuristic anime style firefighter. But the graphical effects and all seem pretty cool for the for the Saturn back then. But it seems like it's at the very least a very unique experience on there. Magic Knight Ray Earth, which again I thought it came out earlier in the year, but apparently it came out in December of this year. And Magic Knight Ray Earth originally had come out, I believe, back in 1995 in Japan. I think that was when it came out, but it just never actually got ported over here until late this year by Working Designs. So Working Designs is again the company that did like the Lunar games where they, the like the packaging that they did for the instruction manual and all that was really cool. I believe it might have come with a few extras. I'm not quite sure, but the translation was really well done, if a bit kind of quirky and kind of included some modern pop culture references and all. But for the most part, it's a very well done translation, and and they even improved on some of the game mechanics or just like the UI and things like that. So it was cool that they brought it out, and it's become a very highly sought after Saturn game and one of the more expensive ones too. Another game that I used to own, but so some of the games I'm going to talk about here, I own them, and they're kind of highly sought after, valuable items now. And I kind of hate that I sold these games, but it is what it is. Well, Magic Knight Ray Earth, and basically what this game is based on an anime where you play like these 3 high school girls, and they in modern times, and then they get whisked away to this fantasy land, and so then you're trying to just stop the evil there. Basically, it's a very kind of like adolescent story to it and all, but it's funny. And then the translation again that Working Designs did, even though they in some games they're kind of modern style of writing, at least for the time, seemed a little out of place. And this one, it kind of works because again, you're playing these 3 high school girls that can be a little obnoxious, but that kind of lends to the writing of their style, and so it actually fits. This is a game where I actually don't mind it. I feel like it actually goes well with the tone of the game, but the graphics on it are really amazing. I mean, had some of the best like 2D art of this generation. Very colorful, very detailed, big sprites and cool effects and all that, and cool music. Oh, it's a simple kind of action adventure game and all, but just but worth playing through though and all. If you enjoy like just games kind of in the vein of like Zelda and all. I mean, it's not quite like Zelda, but kind of also. So definitely a worthwhile game to play right for the Sega Saturn. But then we got Shining Force 3, which is for me personally my favorite tactical RPG. I didn't quite beat it, but I got to the last boss, and I just was never able to beat it. But I have a very good understanding of what the game's all about, and yeah, just I mean, so Shining Force 3, there was this one here. So Shining Force 3, and this is the one that we got in North America. But the whole Shining Force 3, it was kind of a trilogy onto its own, where there was like the first one that we got, and then Scenario 2, and then Scenario 3. And so it's a very big, expansive political sort of medieval anime story to it, where there's a lot going on and there's three main characters. So in the one that we got over here in the States, you control Symbios with his army of characters. And then there's scenario two, which you play Prince Median, I think is his name, or Medallion or something like that. And in scenario two, you control his storyline and his, band of characters. And then in scenario three, you control Julian and his, team also in that scenario there. And so in these games, they all kind of cross paths with each other. So for example, in the first one, Julian, he ends up being a party member with you for a period of time in your game, and then he goes off somewhere else. So they all kind of like interact with each other. And so from my understanding, then it all kind of culminates to a grand finale of some sort in the scenario three. So a very ambitious project that nobody really knows about. Because it seems like the Shining Force games 1 and 2 are the more popular ones that people talk about on the Genesis, but nobody really seems to know about this one. But it was a very ambitious project, and they're very well done. I mean, they play really well. I mean, for the time, the graphics were pretty decent in it. The play mechanics are, just like the ones on the Genesis, just a bit expanded more. And great story, great writing to him, amazing music, but they just kind of they just weren't a hit. And again, it was on the Sega Saturn that was already on its way out. And for, I mean, hardcore enthusiasts, yeah, they know about this game and all, but I don't know how many people like more casual like that understand that it was a big project that, we missed out on. We only got 1/3 of the whole project here in the States. Luckily nowadays, because of fan translations and the modding community and all that, thank God for them that they've been able to keep the series afloat here in the States, because they've done like an English translation which you can play now. So if you have like an emulator and you download the ROM, or you acquire the ROM, I'll say, you can you can get it with the English patch translation. So that's cool, right? So you can experience that game now all the way through, through this means. And so that's awesome that they've been able to do that. Um, but yeah, it's just a cool project. I want to try to go through the whole series at some point, and just because I really enjoyed the first one, and from I haven't really messed around with the other two, but from what I can tell, if it's anything more of the same, just kind of expands on the overall story and lore, I'm all about it. Because I think it's an excellent project, and just an excellent series of games. But then we also got the big magnum opus for the, or what is it, Magnus or magnum opus, or however you say that, for the Saturn, and that's Panzer Dragoon Saga. So Panzer Dragoon Saga, I talked about this game already fairly extensively previously on my YouTube channel. It's when I was trying to do my little Let's Play series where I was playing games for, choose 3 games in the Relay of Gaming thing. Oop, there goes my microphone again. Basically, I kind of sit like kind of close to my microphone and all, and I just like the microphone part of it, it's kind of loose, and so it just kind of tips over a little bit. But anyway, so I talk about it quite a bit there, right, where I played like the first 30 minutes of it. But basically, long story short, this game here, Sega really wanted to throw a lot of weight and money on this series here, because the first 2 games they're just on-rail shooters, right? As far as like the gameplay of it goes and on, they're really good on-rail shooters, and they're some of my favorite Saturn games. But they are the story to them, the setting, the music, the lore, and everything. It seems like they really wanted to do like an expansive universe with the Panzer Dragoon games, and that really seems to ring true with this one here, Panzer Dragoon Saga. Because while the first 2 were rail shooters, this one ends up being kind of a combination of a rail shooter with turn-based RPG with, at the time, what you can maybe consider a bit of like open world exploration, which is, kind of silly to say, but at the time, I mean, it was kind of cool because you're flying a dragon over this land, right? And which is small compared to like what we have nowadays. But at the time, it felt like that. And it's an interesting combination that makes for like a really fun game. And the whole universe of the Panzer Dragoon is very intriguing and beautiful, with very kind of mysterious and like, I don't know, it's they have a feel. They have a, what does it say nowadays? It has a vibe. Panzer Dragoon games have a vibe to them, and you just have to kind of play them to understand that. And so anyway, so this game came out late in the Saturn's lifetime, and it seemed like probably too highly of an ambition or a lofty goal, but it's almost like they were wanting to make this game sort of be like Sega's answer to Final Fantasy VII. Right now, again, Final Fantasy VII is just such a mega hit, right, at the time, and I talked about that game last episode, but this is what Sega had, and so I think it was like their way of trying to like compete against that, which again, that was way too ambitious for them. But it doesn't mean that this game was bad though. And if anything, but it's actually a really great game. Um, and it got ported over here to North America and Europe also, I believe. Now, because it came out towards the end of the Saturn's lifetime, and ultimately they only produced like so many copies. I've seen a few numbers thrown around and all. Like I think one time I saw 750,000. I don't know for sure, but there wasn't a whole lot from what I understand of this game produced, and so because of that, it's become a very highly sought after Saturn game, and also a very expensive one too. So just to put it into perspective, so I own these three games, right? Magic Knight Rare, Shining Force 3, and Panzer Dragoon Saga. And so I went through a period some years ago where I needed some money and was also trying to clear out some stuff here and all. As we had gotten a house and just was trying to make room here for our house and some of the stuff that I had that I was just trying to get rid of. And so a combination of that made me decide that I should get rid of these games, which I really shouldn't have. But I mean, like I said, right, you do what you got to do sometimes. But for Magic Knight Ray Earth, I ended up selling that game, and this is on price charting. And again, this was right before the pandemic, so this is before prices really skyrocketed. So Magic Knight Ray Earth, I sold it for roughly around 450 or so, within that range, I think. Shining Force 3, I sold it for closer to no, wait a minute. That game was priced at 200. I think close to 200 or so. But I made a mistake and all, and ultimately the game I ended up selling the game for cheaper. Just I remember I did something and anyways, the game sold for cheaper than that basically. But then Panzer Dragoon Saga, that one was kind of my baby though, and that one because I knew I was going to get a decent amount on that, and I want to say I sold it for like within 1,200 to 1,500 or so, within that range right there. And again, this was before the pandemic, so I don't even know what it's going for now. But that was that one, that one helped pay some bills, basically. And yeah, and I remember the seller or the guy that I sold it to. We were messaging a bit on it and all. He just seemed super thrilled to have this version, and I was like, "Damn, you paid quite a bit for it." So I hope you, because I kept these games in like pristine condition, and so afterwards he messaged me and all, and he was just pretty excited that he got a copy of it, and so I'm pretty happy for him. Hope you're whoever you are, dude. I hope you're enjoying that game because I mean, you paid quite a bit for it, but it's I would never personally pay that much for a game, but I get it though. I kind of get it. And yeah, Panzer Dragoon Saga, just an amazing game. Plays really well on emulation. The only thing though is that you have to kind of figure out the whole multi-disc thing, which I'm actually trying to figure out right now too, because RetroArch had a bit of an update on how you can play multi-disc games that I'm trying to sort out. But because I've been trying to replay it recently, I just got to the end of disc one, and now I'm trying to. It won't let me advance because I get the whole multi-disc thing on emulation. But yeah, an amazing game for the time on the Saturn. Great graphics, great. The game is very fun to play. Great story to it. Great music. Amazing music, and yeah, just an overall amazing experience that unfortunately just has been kind of lost to time now. And so thank God again for emulation, because otherwise things like this would have been lost in the dust. But yeah, just an amazing experience. So that's on the Sega Saturn, a game that was, or a system that was failing. And look how many good stuff we got for it. I tell you, 1998 was a crazy year. And now let's jump over to the PlayStation. So in the PlayStation, we started off the year fairly early. I think it was in January that this game came out in, but we started off with Resident Evil 2. And coming off the heels of the first one, which was a pretty big hit. Resident Evil 2 is the kind of sequel that pretty much exemplifies like what you want in a sequel: bigger, badder, and better. Take kind of if the first one was already pretty awesome, you just expand on that all the way across, right? Better gameplay, better graphics, better music. I guess that one's a little subjective, but just better, bigger scope, bigger everything, and that's what this one is here. So in the first Resident Evil, so it takes place in a mansion, and so for the second one, it expands out to Raccoon City. A lot of it is in a police station and all, but you definitely explore some outside areas and also other areas. So it kind of expands more on the Resident Evil universe, which is cool to see. The story, I mean, it's cheesy Capcom goodness and all that, which I don't know. It's something about Capcom like stories and all that. They're not too super in depth, but they're still a lot of fun, and just overall better produced. Got rid of the full motion video cinemas, which I still love from the first one. But this time it doesn't in CGI, and which was just more better accepted back then. The voice acting is improved too. I mean, it's not the highest of quality, but seems a little bit more professional than the first one, which I still love. Through all its cheesiness and all, the first one is just GOAT when it comes to voice acting. But the second one, you could tell that there were more professional actors and all that. Again, no shade to the actors of the first one; you all did amazing. But you could just tell, right, and all that it was just this time they had possibly more money to throw around, right, and also hire more professional actors. And now you control two different characters, right, Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. And so kind of like the first one, where you have there are two scenarios, and with slightly different areas that they explore and all, more or less the same, but has a few different elements. And then you also meet unique characters onto each scenario, right, and all that. So kind of makes it worthwhile, right, to play through both scenarios. But the cool thing about this one also is that when you beat a campaign, so let's say you beat it with Leon, I think this is how it works. But let's say you beat the game with Leon, it unlocks a second scenario for Claire, and vice versa. So these second scenarios, I think I played them way back in the day, but it changes some of the story elements to it, and also it basically you have like 4 campaigns that you can go through in this game. So that's part of the reason why I love this one so much, is that it really ups up the replayability value to them, as there's a lot to see and do and all as far as Resident Evil games go. And just with the new weapons, again, new areas to explore and all, it really expanded on the Resident Evil lore. And this one here is my favorite Resident Evil game from like the old style. It's just really well done. The pre-rendered backdrops were, they were more improved. The polygon models are a bit more improved also, and just overall just a joy to play through. And just an awesome sequel. I mean, it really was. It's just a great sequel that Resident Evil started popularizing the survival horror genre and putting this series on the map. Resident Evil 2 already made it legendary. So just so you can see the impact of this game. And that came out in January, right? So we were off to the races, right, and all in this year with Resident Evil 2. But we got a lot of like cool games too also on the PlayStation that weren't like didn't have like a big lasting impact like some of these other games and all, but were definitely cool for the time, right? And I mean, they're still cool, for sure. But we had things like Ridge Racer, or R4 Ridge Racer Type 4, which is for many considered the best Ridge Racer game. I really like Ridge Racer. That's the one that I really got into the most and all, in my favorite personal one. But maybe again, that's just because the one that I put the most time in, because I went through like the Grand Prix mode and all that. Where Ridge Racer 4, I remember playing it and I got a little ways into it and all, into like the season or whatever it's called mode in the game. And it's definitely cool and all, but I kind of prefer Ridge Racer. But, this is the one that is really popular and beloved by a lot of people. And for many people, right, their favorite Ridge Racer game, maybe even their favorite racing game and all. But looks really nice on the PlayStation, plays really well, cool music. It really expanded more on the Ridge Racer formula, where it started off on just, having one track, from the very first one. But yeah, I mean, it was just an ongoing series that made the PlayStation, one of the series that made the PlayStation popular. And we're up to its fourth entry here, and it was just still firing on all cylinders. Uh, Pun intended or pun not intended? I think I did intend that pun, so we'll keep it at pun intended. And we also had a Busted Groove. This game has, I guess, maybe become a bit of a hidden gem, and it's a really fun game. If you can find it any way to play, it's really fun. I don't think this game ever got re-released, and I wouldn't think so also because of the music in it. It has, I would assume it's like licensed music. But basically, in this game, it's so we had Parappa the Rapper previously, which I don't know if actually did Parappa the Rapper already come out. I don't think I've talked about that game. I'm not sure, but it's like a rhythm-based game where you have so it's kind of like a dance-off basically. So you select two very you select two out of like I don't know 10 characters. They're really kind of like colorful in design, and they have their personalities and all, and they're they're pretty fun. And so it's kind of like a fighting game in a sense where it's like a one-on-one dance off, and then as you beat someone, you keep advancing further until you get to the last boss, I guess you can say. But each stage, so it's unique to each character and has a really catchy song. I mean, the soundtrack on this is just amazing. And so you kind of start off dancing, and so then you have to hit these button prompts that pop up on the screen. And if you get them correctly, then the camera kind of starts shifting towards your favor, indicating that you're winning, and your dance moves get a little crazier and all. And the motion, I would assume they did like motion capture on this and all. It's pretty cool to look at. And again, the music is hella catchy. And then you got like these special moves you can do, and you also have like dodge because you can attack the other player, but then you also have like a dodge move at all to try to avoid that attack. And it's just a blast to play through. If you get a chance, check it out. It's a lot of fun, and I remember playing this game quite a bit multiplayer with my brother, and I think even my sister at one point. And it's just a lot of fun. Bust a Groove. God, I got that music stuck in my head now. it's so catchy. It's so good. It's good stuff. But then we also had some cool platformers on the PlayStation. So again, kind of showing that the PlayStation it could do just a range of stuff, right? Like the Sega Saturn could do really good arcade games and fighting games. Had some okay. I mean, no, I shouldn't say okay. They were actually amazing, but didn't have like a whole lot of like quantity as far as like RPGs, platformers, and things like that. The Nintendo 64 could do really good 3D platformers and some first-person shooters and all, but maybe lacked in other areas like more adventure-like games and things like that. The PlayStation just could do it all. I mean, it had like decent games in pretty much every category. So for platformers, so we had two really good ones this year, and one of them was the third game in the Crash Bandicoot series, so Crash Bandicoot Warp. And so just kind of more of the same, right? And all just again the bigger, better thing. I've played part one and I beat it. I've gotten about halfway through part two, and I remember I used to own all three of them, and I think I popped in the disc to part three at one point and played like maybe a level or two or so, but never actually continued to go through it because I wanted to play the other ones first. But I haven't gotten through it all that far in that one. But I feel like if I play it all the way through, I get the feeling that this would be my favorite Crash Bandicoot game. But I just haven't gone through it all the way right for me to really say that definitively. But yeah, it's more of the same. Crash Bandicoot games are just hella fun, and I mean the graphics on them and all. I mean we're talking like top tier PlayStation graphics here at this point. It looks, I mean for like its low poly aesthetics, it looks almost like a cartoon also. So pretty impressive how they were able to pull all that off. But yeah. I mean it's more of the same, but that's not a bad thing. I mean it's one of the best games on the PlayStation this year for sure. But we also got a new series here with Spiral the Dragon. So this game was developed by Insomniac Games, who they would become a very premier PlayStation developer in the years that come. And I don't know, it wasn't their first game. They did some other stuff, I'm pretty sure, prior to this. I can't think of what exactly, but I think they had like some kind of a first-person shooter. I could be wrong, but Spiral the Dragon was probably, I would say, their biggest hit they had up to this point. And you control this cute little purple dragon and all out to save like other dragons, and it's in this kind of fantasy medieval kind of land, and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of a collectathon. platformer, what we were already starting to see on the Nintendo 64. So this was like, the PlayStation's version of that. And it's great. It's a really great platformer, a lot of charm to it, a lot of, the animation to it and all is really well done, kind of in line with what we were seeing on the Crash Bandicoot games. And so just a lot of fun to play through. Yeah, so Spiral the Dragon, just a great fun game. I never played it a whole lot back then, but I've played it more recently, and yeah, I mean it's really fun to play. But then we also had, speaking of, going back to another sequel that came out this year, and that was for Tomb Raider 3. So the series is still going strong. Part one and two were a big hit. With this one here, this is where I think Tomb Raider kind of started taking a bit of um, a downgrade as far as like just overall popularity and quality and all that. And Tomb Raider 3 is for the time. I know these games have been heavily criticized now for its controls and all that, but for the time, it was still pretty popular. You can say like a big budget AAA release, for what was considered that in those days. And the only thing I think what made this one kind of it was kind of more of the same. You had a few new moves and all, but nothing too crazy. You can now select. So if I remember right, the initial area you start off and you had to start there, but then after that you can select like where you want to go to afterwards. The problem with this one that I recall from back then, because I really got into one and two, and I didn't mind the controls too much back then, but this one here, it's very difficult. And so I remember this was one that I got a ways into it, but I was kind of complaining the whole time because it felt, what I recall is that it was very difficult. Like the enemies, I think, were just harder. The puzzle solutions and all that, or where to go to and all, was more obscure and all, it's just something about the overall game that it was just a harder game. I mean, the graphics were pretty nice, I mean, for the time and all, but it was just more, it was just not quite as user friendly, I guess. And it is known to be a very difficult game even to this day. And so I think that's where this series kind of started taking a turn for the south. But it was still fairly popular though, and Tomb Raider still had, it was still considered a pretty big name in gaming. And but yeah, I mean, I think this is where it was, going from here, I felt like the series went south afterwards. Um, okay, but yeah, let's see. And so another game that we got here that was really cool was, I this is actually a favorite of mine. I really enjoy this game. It's Well, it might have been dropped off out of my top 100 games of all time, because there has been some recent stuff that I've added on there. So this one might have fallen off of it. But this one, at least the last time I made a list, it was actually my number 100 game of all time. But it's just I really enjoy the overall atmosphere of this game and the just old setting and all that, and it plays fairly well enough. But that's Medieval, and so this game was created by I think it was like Sony Cambridge Studios or something like that. Um, I believe they were based out of Europe. But in this game, very inspired by like Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, that sort of style. But in this game, you play this knight, Sir Daniel Fortescue, and well, you play his skeleton of him, because the game is basically, the story to it anyways is where you were this knight and you are revered for being a very heroic warrior and all, for taking on a dark sorcerer some years ago. But the true story is that you took an arrow to the eye or something like that, and so then you're resurrected to try to, to live up to your legendary status, basically, something to that effect. And so to try to take on this evil wizard. The game, it is kind of clunky. It is, and the controls are a bit loose. Like, the jumping on it and all, it can be a little frustrating. Just, I mean, this is early 3D gaming still, but it's still the setting to it, the just the overall atmosphere of this game. It's just a joy to play through. I really love this game, the music to it and all that. I can kind of overlook some of the somewhat clunky controls just because I love the overall everything else about this game. And yeah, just a lot of fun to play through. I remember I got it back then and just had a lot of fun with it. There is a remake or a I would remake slash remaster, whatever you want to call it, that came out years later, right on the PlayStation 4, which kind of cleans up a lot of the stuff. But this one I still feel is worth checking out, and it's just a great time on the PlayStation. We also got Abe's World, Abe's Exodus this year. I don't have a whole lot of experience with these games here, but they're sort of play like kind of like those cinematic platformers, as far as like they're a little bit more slower paced, puzzle based, and where you play these characters. I think they're called Munchkins or something like that. And you're trying to escape from a factory to so you don't get killed. I think I remember they're pretty popular back then and all. And I played it a bit, and it definitely seems fun. And just haven't really gone all the way through it, but it was fairly popular on the PlayStation. I mean, popular enough that it got Astrobot in the game Astrobot. So I feel like if you became an Astrobot in the game Astrobot, then you were popular enough, right? And all that that you got on there, where that way people can look at like, hey, I got that Astrobot. I remember him from that game. So for what it's worth, right? And all, he's one of the characters on there. Same with Medieval too, also. But then we got so in the United States, anyways, because I believe this game came out in the previous year. But we got Gran Turismo though this year here in the States, and Gran Turismo, I think it was the second one that became the highest selling PlayStation game. I think, but either way, Gran Turismo also sold ridiculously well on the PlayStation, and it was so developed by this company called Polyphony Digital, I think, and I remember when this game came out, the graphics on it were just truly stunning because for the time they looked realistic. And not only that they looked realistic like the car models anyways, but also when you the replays is what really made the game stand now. And as you're watching the replays as you're going through the course, the weight of the car kind of shifts and all that with the wheels and all it looked realistic at least for the time, and it was pretty impressive how they pulled that off. But basically, Gran Turismo became huge because it was a racing simulation game, which, I mean, we've had some before already, but this one really kind of like elevated that genre. And for car enthusiasts, it was like a dream come true game. I remember with this one in part two, like for example, my brother and a friend of his, and his friend was very much a kind of a gearhead, and they heavily got into this game, and trying to get the licenses, tweaking their cars, and all that. I remember they really got into that whole part of it there and all. I personally, with the Gran Turismo games, I mean, I enjoyed them, but I even to this day, I tend to be more of a more arcadey kind of racing game, for me, a good in between is kind of my sweet spot for racing games. So more recently, right, the like the Forza Horizon games I really like, or earlier it was I missed the series a lot, the Project Gotham Racing series, because that series right there was kind of a good middle ground where it was I mean, it wasn't hyper realistic, but it wasn't hyper arcadey like. Um, but anyways, but Gran Turismo though, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people that like cars, right? I mean, who doesn't like cars? And so this game, to be able to ride in, some of the more elegant cars out there and all, and get to tweak them and fine tune them and all. I mean, it was so kind of like what RPG nuts like, where you're customizing your character and tweaking little bits here and their stats and all that kind of stuff. That's what this game was for, like car enthusiasts. And so, outside of like, my brother and his friend, for a lot of people, it was just a big deal for the, I would assume for that reason there, right? It just let you live out your fantasy, right? And all on driving these really elegant cars. But yeah, I remember being impressed with like the replays of these games. It was pretty impressive. And you had a really good soundtrack too, with a lot of licensed tracks from, popular music from back in the day there. But yeah, Gran Turismo, this is the first one that we got here in the States, and very popular, would become much more popular with its sequel, which we'll talk about that one, I believe, next year. But yeah, this first one, though, definitely set a certain standard for racing simulation games. And I mean, Gran Turismo would go on to be huge. I mean, there was a movie based out of it. A movie based out of Gran Turismo that was actually a true story and a really cool story that happened. Um, with a bit of a tragedy. Well, actually, no, I should say a big tragedy that happened, unfortunately. But that's how big this game became. That it just suffice to say that someone that played Gran Turismo, and this is for one of the later entries, though probably, but someone that played Gran Turismo ended up becoming a professional race car driver. I mean, if you haven't heard about the story and all that, it's actually really cool. And like the movie that came out of it, I was actually really impressed with it. But the overall actual story, right? It's very impressive, very inspiring, very much an underdog story and all. And I actually didn't know that until the movie got announced, and I was like, what are they doing a Gran Turismo movie? And then I started looking at it, and I was like, oh, this is actually based on a true story. And yeah, it's really an amazing story. The movie is pretty well done, but just the actual story itself, it's if you don't know about it, definitely check it out. It's just awesome stuff. Um, but we also got some pretty cool RPGs too on the PlayStation. Some of the best that came out on the system, actually. There's three of them, three notable ones. There might have been some other ones and all, but these are like three notable ones that came out. And that was Suikoden 2, which was a follow up to the first Suikoden game, which is it started becoming a cult hit. And this one seemed like it wasn't quite as it seemed like there wasn't as many copies of this game produced. I don't know for sure, but the people that played it though really enjoyed this game. And I played and beat part one, which is it's an excellent. I love part one, and this one it's considered by pretty much everyone that it's even better. So I'm really excited to try to play through this one at some point soon, especially since it got re-released. But yeah, I mean these Suikoden games are they seem like grand in scope because you can get up to like 108 characters in them. And so it seems kind of a nightmare to try to manage all these characters and all. But no, actually, it's really streamlined. It's really well done and really fun. The stories, at least with the first one, it's really well written, but simple enough and all where it's easy to digest and all. Like there's not it's not like a very convoluted story. The turn-based battle system is a lot of fun, and actually trying to get all these characters is also a lot of fun. Cool pixelated retro style graphics and amazing music too. Again, the first one was amazing, and if this one's any better, it's just oh, I'm sure it's an amazing time. And so again, wasn't like a big seller, I wouldn't think, for the PlayStation, but a game that the people that played it know about it. They definitely have a lot of fond memories of this game, and all is being noted as one of the better RPGs on the PlayStation, a system that was known for having a crazy amount of good RPGs. So so that definitely speaks volume of it. But then we also had Parasite Eve. And so this game came out fairly late in the year, I believe, if I recall, at least within the fall through winter time, somewhere around there. But the game takes place during Christmas. And Parasite Eve, so it was a game by Square Enix, or I'm sorry, jumping ahead there a bit, Squaresoft, but published, I believe, by that Square Electronic Arts merger that we talked about earlier, where basically Electronic Arts helped them publish some games over here in the States. And so Parasite Eve, it's a game that is based, I believe, on some kind of a science fiction novel in Japan, and then I think it was made into a movie. So it's not like beat for beat what that story is, but it takes a lot of inspiration from it. And so it's set in modern times, which I thought was cool, and it takes place during Christmas. So a good game to play during, for the Christmas season. But you play this cop, Aya Bria, and she's basically you end up getting involved in this whole scenario about this kind of uh, being or sorceress, or well, not sorceress, but basically this woman, Eve, that has like these crazy powers, and somehow you're connected to her with these powers. And so you're trying to solve the mystery of like who you are, how you get these powers and all. And it's very kind of like a supernatural kind of horror RPG. And it's very unique in that sense because we don't get a whole lot of like RPGs like that. But it has like this turn-based battle system, where it has like an ATB gauge and all, but you're actually moving your character around in the battlefield, or in the battle scene, and you're using your weapons are like guns, and so again, it's kind of interesting, right? Because again, we were more used to like your weapons are like swords and things like that, where this is more of in a modern setting. But yeah, very fun battle system, and then your magic, so to speak, are what's called PE Parasite Eve powers, I think. And yeah, just a really fun battle system, cool graphics. Has a pre-rendered graphics from back in the day that were popular, and the cinemas were really well done too, also by Square Soft. Actually, some of the best during this era. The just a little intro. Well, the not so much the intro, but it has like a kind of like you can say almost like a trailer that it starts off with when you first boot up the game, and it's really well done, really well produced, and the cool music that plays in it and all that gets you hyped to play the game. Very interesting. It really feels like a blend between like Resident Evil and Final Fantasy, with character designs by Tetsuya Nomura. So, if you're never heard of this game, but you know about Tetsuya Nomura, maybe from more of the more recent Final Fantasy games or even Kingdom Hearts, check this game out. I think you'll like his art style and all for his character designs, and it's a pretty cool game. It's for being like an RPG. It's not a very long game, but it's definitely worth a playthrough. I really enjoyed this game, and actually, the last time I did my the it might have fallen off because again, I've fairly recently added some new games, but this game came in at I believe my 99th favorite game of all time. So because this and Medieval were like towards the bottom of my overall 100 top 100 list. But if any game that I have on my list there and all, I think is an absolute banger that people should definitely play. And so yeah, definitely a fun time that I had playing this game during I think I played it around the Christmas time of 1998. And again, the game takes place during Christmas. So I had a lot of fun with it. And yeah, just a great game. And unfortunately, it hasn't really been re-released. It came out on the PlayStation 3, that you can get it like digitally. But other than that, I don't think it's ever come out again. Um, and yeah, not sure why. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the license. I'm not sure. But yeah, great game. If you can track it down, definitely recommend playing it. But the biggest RPG for me, though, and one of my favorite games of all time, is Xenogears. And Xenogears is an amazing JRPG. It could be one of my favorite games of all time. There's just one kind of big thing about it, though, that holds it back on that. But even as is, it's one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had playing a video game. So Xenogears. And if you don't know about this game, but you're more of a modern gamer, you're like, is that kind of like Xenoblade? Well, yeah, kind of. It's from the same creators of Xenoblade, which we know what will go on to be the Xenoblade series. So I haven't really played the Xenoblade games. I've messed around with them a little bit, but my understanding they have really complex, deep stories and science fiction stories and all that. So if you like that, definitely seek this game out, Xenogears. It's one of the most like philosophically deep stories ever in a video game. Probably the most ambitious story ever in a video game that I've ever played because it tries to go so deep into like philosophy and science fiction and religion and you know self-reflecting on your self-identity and so many different things. It's kind of hard to explain it all because it is such a deep story and it's a very long game too. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of side content to it, but just the main meat of the game, it's long. I mean, we're talking like 70, 80 hours or so to get through this game. Uh, and so what it is, so it's the game style. So it's a turn-based JRPG. The character, they're like actual sprites, but then the 3D I'm sorry, the backgrounds are in 3D. Where like for example, you can rotate the camera, and the battles that you get into, well, they're kind of two different styles. There's one where you control your human character or your humanoid character, and then it has like a bit of a fighting game element to it where you can do combos in it and all. It's actually really fun. But then also you get to ride these mechs, robotic mechs, and when you get into battle in those, it's kind of the same thing where it's turn based, and then you can do these combos, and only you're in a big mech though, so you have some extra abilities with that there, and so it's kind of like as far as like the setting, the I guess it's kind of like Voltron meets Gundam, kind of, if you're familiar with those properties there. And but again, the story is so man, it's kind of hard to describe now. It's just I get goosebumps over just thinking about the things that happen in this game, and it goes so deep and just really. It's kind of told like where it's keep leaving like these little breadcrumbs of mysteries and you're trying to unravel things, and it can be a bit convoluted at first, right? Because you're getting all these things thrown at you, like things about like God and the gospel and the Garden of Eden and all, but then you get these cool mechs and all, and it's like, what is going on here? But for my brain at the time when I was 18 years old, I was just soaking it all in. I was like, I absolutely love this. And a lot of people did also apparently, right? Because it is such a big cult hit for a lot of people. And all that, and it's accompanied by some amazing music done from the composer of Chrono Trigger. And so I've already raved about that game earlier, right? And all how great the music is. And here it's just really well done too. Also, that really elevates just the action, the drama to it, and all. And one of my again, it would probably be one of my favorite games of all time. It's just that the game was highly ambitious. So from what I understand of this game is that I might get some of my facts wrong here, but I think it was like a husband and wife team. And so they really had a vision for a game that they wanted to do that really leaned heavily into like philosophy and religion, and I believe there's like references to like the philosopher Nietzsche. I think is his name, and to tell this really complex, deep story. Originally, from what I understand, it was pitched as an idea for Final Fantasy VII, but ultimately, I think it was just a little too complex for Final Fantasy VII. I think that Squaresoft was like, no, this is not quite what we want to do for that, for our big flagship series. But apparently they liked the ideas enough where they greenlit for them to go off on the side and do their own project, right, with Xenogears. And so, which ended up being, becoming again the game that we got. Um, and But because they were in, I think what happened was because they were in between, because again, Final Fantasy games were being pumped out, pretty quickly at this time. And so because it was sandwiched between like Final Fantasy VII and then Final Fantasy IX, which we would get the later year, and then Final Fantasy VIII, and then we got Final Fantasy IX the next year, and then Final Fantasy X. I can only imagine that SquareSoft was probably like crazy busy trying to develop these games, and so it sounds like they weren't able to quite put all of their efforts and resources to the Xenogears game, which started becoming highly ambitious. And okay, here we go. So, because I was looking at it on here on the side. So let me kind of read through some of this here, right, to maybe better explain kind of what I'm trying to get at. So, created by Tetsuya Takahashi and his wife Kaori Tanaka as a proposal for Final Fantasy VII, it was allowed to be developed as its own project. First as a sequel to Chrono Trigger, and then as an original game with a science fiction premise. The characters were designed by Kunihiko Tanaka, while the gears were designed by Junya Ishigaki and Yoshinori Ogura. The designs were portrayed during in-game cinematics through the use of anime cutscenes. Due to time constraints, the team's general inexperience, the second half of the game's plot was primarily told through cutscenes. So that's what I was going to get at, basically. So I'm kind of right in some of the stuff I was saying there. But yeah, it was getting so it was just too ambitious that the first disc, because it's on two discs, and the first disc, which is kind of the bulk of the game, amazing all the way throughout, right? Just amazing all the way. The gameplay, the story, the graphics, the music, everything is just amazing. You get to the second disc though, and so much of it is kind of like it's text on a screen, and then you have like kind of, if I recall right at the bottom right, you have like your character. I think either like walking or sitting down, and it has like, I remember a lot of the times there's like this cross pendant that's kind of swinging back and forth and all, but then you just get a lot of text to read as it's basically explaining to you what happens in a certain part of the game, and then you play a boss battle or something like that. All right. Sorry if there's like all little pauses there. My daughter's coming in here and was just asking for stuff. And oh, she keeps bringing up these old memories. I told her about a dog that I had when I was growing up, Hercules. And so she just seems to be curious about asking about him. And so she'll just ask me, she's like, Daddy, do you miss Hercules? So I was like, yes, why you got to bring up old shit? Like, yes, of course I miss that dog. I mean, this is years ago. I mean, the dog passed when I was like, what, in my early to mid 20s, and I'm, what, 45 now. But it's like, man, why you got to bring up those old memories? My old dog as a kid. But it's cute though. But yeah, but anyway, so get Xenogears, right? And so yeah, so again, it tells you a bunch of text on the screen, and then you play out a boss battle and all, and that's the or sometimes you go through like a dungeon, if I recall right, and then after that, eventually you get to the end boss of the game and all that. So the overall finale of the game and all that, I remember I was satisfied with. I don't recall a whole lot of it, but just the overall second disc though, it definitely felt rushed. I mean, heavily rushed, right? Like they had to like get it out the door, right? And so let me just kind of read a little bit more here. So the game was almost not localized due to its religious content. Its localization was handled by Square Electronic Arts staff and translator Richard Honeywood, who described it as one of the most troublesome games of his career. Xenogears received critical acclaim, with many calling it a work of art due to its heavy religious themes and elements of Jungian psychology. Praises particularly went towards the storyline, gameplay, characters, and psychological and religious themes, but received criticism for the rush pace of the second disc. Okay, so there, yeah, due to lack of gameplay and excessive narration. By 2003, the game had shipped 1.19 million copies worldwide, gaining a cult following and considered one of the greatest video games ever made. While a direct sequel has not been developed, Takahashi would later founded Monolith Soft and developed the Xenosaga trilogy and Xenoblade Chronicle games as spiritual successors. All right, so there you go. So that kind of explained it better than I could. But yeah, oh, this game, I fucking love this game. It is so good, and I want to try to go through the game again and beat it. It was never re-released except for being on the PlayStation 3 digital online store. Which is still up. So, if you happen to have the PlayStation 3, and all, you go get it right there, right? Because otherwise you're probably going to pay quite a bit for the physical copy of this game. Or, emulation. But yeah, just an amazing game. So it is just so cool. So cool. I'll try to talk about this game at some point later. Maybe I'll try to, as I'm going through the game. And one of the things that I plan to do after I'm done with like my Years in Gaming retrospective is just play through a game and then talk about it, through like several episodes. It's kind of what I have planned, right? So this will be probably one of my top games that I would want to do that with, just because there's just so much to dissect in this game. It's kind of hard to describe, but I would just say again, if you're a newer video game player and you've been into the Xenoblade games, which I know those games are highly popular, go back and check this one out. I highly recommend it. It is just so well done. And on the flip of that is I need to start playing the Xenoblade games because I know those are pretty amazing too. But yeah, Xenogears. So much good stuff to say there. Just absolutely amazing. So yeah, so that was so again, we're not even done with some of the games that came out in 1998. But then we go jumping over to the Nintendo 64. So I'm just going to kind of go through these here because I don't have a whole lot of experience with them. I just know that they had some popularity, right? On all, if you were a Nintendo 64 system owner. And so we had Banjo-Kazooie, which was known to be one of the better 3D platformers out there. And for a lot of people, from what I understand, a lot of people even preferred this game over Super Mario 64. So, just to kind of show you, right, on how popular this game was. And I played a bit of it and all. Yeah, it definitely seems fun and a 3D platformer that I would love to continue playing. We also had a 1080 snowboarding. Seems to be like a pretty fun snowboarding game for, the Nintendo 64 back then. F-Zero X, which was, the follow-up to F-Zero and a really fun racing game. Kind of in the style of like Wipeout to an extent and all, but with its own sort of flair to it, with the cool Nintendo-like characters and all. It has definitely a fan following, but I don't think the F-Zero games have sold like really well for like Nintendo to say they've been wanting to keep following up on the series. Like they were trying. There was F Zero, excuse me, on the Super Nintendo, F Zero X here that we got on the Nintendo 64, and then eventually the F Zero GX game. But then after that, and then the Game Boy Advance games. But then it just kind of fell off the wayside. So I just feel like the F Zero games never really sold too well for Nintendo because they were really trying to at one point push this to be one of the more premier Nintendo IPs. But for what it is, F Zero X, pretty cool. One of the few games on the Nintendo 64 that runs at 60 frames per second, so it looks pretty good too. But yeah, pretty fun game. I do like F-Zero X. Star Wars Rogue Squadron, which is sort of like a shooting simulation game based within the Star Wars universe. I played a bit of this game, and it seems fun. It's always cool to play as a fly around in a TIE fighter, or not a TIE fighter, X-wing ship. But I played this game after I played the really excellent GameCube game, which we'll talk about later in a few years. So when I went back to this game, I'm like, yeah, it's cool. And if I take myself back to that time, it's like, yeah, I could have seen this being pretty cool. But the more updated one, it just makes so much improvements on it and all that it was kind of hard to go back to this one. But for what it is, though, I'm sure a lot of Star Wars Nintendo 64 fans, had a lot to celebrate with this game. Turok 2, Seeds of Evil. So a sequel to the Turok game that we talked about last episode. And I don't know too much about this game. I did buy it on the Switch because it had an updated version on there. But it seems like this kind of leans more into the sci-fi elements of Turok, where the first one, I think it's like later on in the game that you kind of started seeing more of the sci-fi elements to it. But it seems like it was a pretty fun 3D first-person shooter game back in those days. And then we had, so those were some of the big games on the Nintendo 64. And then we had some cool stuff happening on the PC side of things. Again, I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on these games outside of one particular one, but we had games like StarCraft, Baldur's Gate, and Fallout 2, which were all very cool, either strategy-like games or RPG kind of games that were very involving and all for a lot of PC players, I'm sure, back then, and that, definitely found a big audience. And some of these, like Baldur's Gate and Fallout, for example, are still going to this day, right? So I don't know about StarCraft. I don't know if that's still kind of doing its, there's any new entries in that series there, but with Baldur's Gate, right, well, obviously we had Baldur's Gate 3 and then Fallout 2, or the Fallout series. I mean, there hasn't been like a new game released in a while. I mean, I guess if you can count that Fallout 76, but it has, I mean, those games were very popular, like Fallout 3, New Vegas, Fallout 4. Well, Fallout 4 had a recent release, even though I heard it was kind of a botch release, so that they had for their anniversary edition, I think I heard. But I mean, those games were so big that, I mean, there's an ongoing series, right? I think it's season 2 is upcoming that I heard is really good, actually, or at least the first season. So, still has a big following. But this is where, they were getting some games here, right? Right. And then Half-Life for the PC. So this game I have played. Haven't beat it yet, but I've gotten quite a ways into it. But I played the PlayStation 2 version that came out a few years later. And yeah, a cool first-person shooter, very immersive, where it's telling its story as you're playing along. And that was one of the big deals about this game, is how it kind of sucked you into its world and its gameplay without pausing, right, to like do a cinematic or whatever. The story and everything is just telling you on the fly. And so you play Gordon Freeman as you're in this lab where some shit goes down, and then there's like this alien race, I guess you can say, that starts invading, and you're trying to get out of this lab. Is kind of the bulk of the game, from what I understand. Again, I haven't beaten the game, but I got a ways into it. I would say I think last time I played it, back when it first came out on the PlayStation 2, I got around roughly about, I don't know, I want to just spitballing, but about 75% done with it. So there's a lot of games that I played like to an extent for a while, and then I just kind of dropped off of it for one reason or the other that I need to go back to and play finally to beat them. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, I really enjoy Half-Life. I think it's a cool game, and I definitely want to go back and beat it at some point. I have like a version I can play on my Steam Deck now and all, so I should really try to go back to it and beat that game. But yeah, it was a monumental release, right, for PC gaming and eventually just gaming overall. And again, it was revolutionary for really kind of starting to change the formula with like first person shooters, where before They were just kind of known more for like just running gun shooting games, like I guess what are considered now like boom shooters like Doom and Duke Nukem 3D and those kind of games. This is more of a bit more of a slower pace, telling a story, but the way it told the story and all was very innovative and cool action, cool weapon selection, cool puzzles to solve in it, and just Half Life is a big deal. I like the Half Life games. I don't quite know like why it is such a big deal. There's something about it that just really has appealed to a lot of people. I'd be interested in hearing Half Life fans like, what is it about this series that just really resonates with you? Because again, I like the Half Life games. I think they're great. I just don't see them like I guess how a lot of people see them. So I'd be curious to hear opinions on that. But I do I very much acknowledge right the how monumental they were just to the video game industry as a whole. And the first one came out this year. So had we left off there, and if those were like the major games that came out this year, this would have been a hell of an year for video games, right? Already, I mean, just a hell of an year. But now I'm going to talk about the two games though that really elevated this year to legendary status. And the first game was on the PlayStation, and both of these games were up, a new entry into kind of a legacy series, but that really took the series in a new direction for modern times modern at the time. Yeah, and the first one is for Metal Gear Solid. So Metal Gear Solid is created by Hideo Kojima and his team at the time when he was with Konami. And so we already had some Metal Gear games, right, in the past. So we had Metal Gear, which was on the MSX, and then eventually there was a watered down version of it on the Nintendo. And then Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which was on the MSX computer, and maybe one of the other Japanese computers, I'm not sure. I just know that they came out on the MSX computer. And so both of them were a bit niche, but pretty popular for those that played it, for having pretty involved stories for, at the time. And so when Metal Gear Solid came out, it was immediately being really hyped up. And I remember watching a trailer for it, and it had that song that comes out now at the end of the game called "The Best Is Yet to Come" by, I think the singer's name is Rika Maranka. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but when they played it on the trailer right before the game had come out, I remember thinking, "What is this? This looks crazy cinematic and good, and I want to experience this." And the game came out fairly late in 1998. There was so many games that came out from like September through the end of the year, at least here in North America, right? It was just a crazy stacked year with a lot of good stuff. But the game was being really hyped up, right? They were talking about it was going to like one of the best games of all time. The story to it was crazy good, very cinematic and all, and the voice acting was amazing in it, and all this and this and this, right? And so I remember the game was getting really good reviews and all, and so at this time I was already working. I was out of high school and I got a job, and so I was starting to get, and actually right out of high school and all, I got a decent paying job at the time. So I had a little extra money, right, for myself to spend. And so I was buying up a lot of these video games at the time. And so I was kind of lucky in a way that, I was able to experience these games as they were coming out back to back. And so I was living in a small town at the time, and I drove up about 40 minutes actually to where I live at now. But because in this area, here's where they had like the video game stores and all that I could buy games. And I remember I had pre-ordered this game. And so when it came out, I drove over here. Like it was about a 40-minute drive, and I remember the weather was a little bit bad, so it was a bit of a risky drive that I took but I wanted to pick up this game so bad. And then I drove home and all. And so it was interesting because the time that it came out, when I was driving in this kind of icy kind of weather and all, and then I get home and I pop this game in because I remember I started playing it kind of late one night, and the game takes place in a very snowy area and all. It just kind of fit everything, the mood and everything right off the bat. And I played that game quite a bit the first day and all, and because I beat it within maybe 2 to 3 days because I got so immersed in this game and the story and everything. And it's been one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in a video game, is just being lost in this snowy military base in Alaska with Snake. And, this is my first introduction to a Metal Gear game, as I wasn't familiar with the previous ones. But it has these kind of like a recap that you can do of the first two games that kind of made me understand what happened prior to this game. But by the time I beat it, and then you're getting that song playing, "The Best Is Yet to Come" from that one singer again, Rika Maranka, I think is her name, something like that. Uh, it, it's a feeling that I've never really. I've only have felt so few times in video games before, where I just couldn't believe what I just played. That the level of like storytelling and drama mixed in with the really cool gameplay and everything that you can't really get anywhere else. That I mean, I was already thinking. I mean, I had already played Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VI, Snatcher, which actually Snatcher kind of helped me prepare for what Metal Gear was going to be. Again, another game from Hideo Kojima. But all of those games right there and all that, and now I played this game where I was really thinking to myself, and I never really had anybody to talk to about this stuff outside of my brother, but where I was thinking, how is this? How are video games still being seen as like a nerdy kind of like thing for kids? I was like, this is beyond that now. This is cool shit, and it was, and again, and I'd also just been playing Xenogears, Parasite Eve, Resident Evil 2. And so I just remember thinking that I was so baffled by how can people not think this is like the coolest thing ever. And again, it doesn't help that 1998 was one of the biggest years in gaming, but I just remember thinking that at the time. And Snake was such a cool character, voiced by David Hayter to perfection, and it was just an amazing experience. I just remember that thinking, I was like, I would much rather be playing these kind of games and all that than, now, and that's because I'm a big movie fan too. But I was thinking, I was like, but a lot of this that I'm playing is I prefer over like a lot of movies and all. And again, and the fact that you're playing it, right? You're experiencing it. So it makes for me personally, it makes it more of a personal experience onto you. And so it was just an amazing experience, amazing time, as I was at that time really starting to realize the potential that video games had. And because again, we went to 3D and things are starting to get a little bit more big budget and things like that, where I was astounded by my thought of how much I thought that video games could only keep progressing from there. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, actually, I mean, it was, as we'll talk about in the years that come. But this is where it really started setting the foundation here, right? Of, with everything that has come before and up to this point with this game, where I was like, I am blown away by this medium of video games. And it just kept cementing further and further and further my love for this hobby, that it's never really left me even to this day. And it was because of experiences like this. Yeah, for some reason you haven't played Metal Gear. It's available like on the modern platforms now, and it's not that long of a game, but it, it has the low poly aesthetics as it's called now, so it might be hard to get into for that reason there for some new players. But I still highly recommend you check it out. It's just such an amazing experience, one of my favorite games of all time, and just it's just so good. It's so good. Uh, but even then, even with that game there, it still wasn't considered like the best game of the year, though. I mean, for a lot of people, it was, right? But I think overall, for the most part, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was the game of the year for this year, right? And just another game that, for different reasons, but another game that just really elevated what video games can be to a new level. And the Legend of Zelda games were already starting to be some of the more highly revered games. So up to this point, we had the original Legend of Zelda, was highly revolutionary. Zelda 2 was, a bit of a black sheep. But then there was um, a Link to the Past, which really elevated what the first one was trying to do, and even to this day, known as one of the best games of all time. And then we had the Game Boy one, also the Link's Awakening, which was pretty well received. But Zelda games were already starting to get a reputation as being some of the best in the industry. And then we get this game, and Some games, when we went from 2D to 3D, it kind of stumbled out of the gate a bit. Just random examples, right? And maybe these not aren't the best examples, but like Earthworm Jim, for example. And then we had Earthworm Jim 64, which I don't know, I think it comes out in a later year, but not that great. And well, let's see, I'm trying to think of another one. Castlevania, another one, right? That great 2D games, struggled out of the gate with 3D. Contra, another one too. I'm sure there's other examples. I just can't quite think of one for sure. But then there was one so that made the jump, and it proved why 3D gaming was the next frontier at this time. Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario 64 is probably the most, one of the biggest ones, right? It truly changed gaming, right? As far as like how we control games, in a 3D space and all that. This one too was very monumental when it made that jump because the Zelda games up to this point, again, 2D Zelda games and all were very cool, gave you a sense of this adventure and highly rewarding and all that. When you put it in this 3D space, it made the level of immersion just really grand because there's some issues that I have with like 3D gaming, but when they get it right, it really the strengths that 3D games have over 2D games, and it's not that 2D games can't be immersive and all, but in the 3D space, when it's done well, it does amplify that sense of like immersion and that you are in this playground, so to speak, right? Where you can explore and get lost in this world and all that is more believable than say like what you can do in a 2D game in my personal experience anyways. And again, there's a lot of things that I prefer about 2D games and 3D games, but that's one thing that I feel like 3D games, when they're done really well, can do better. And so at this time, right, running around in the Hyrule field, exploring all these dungeons and areas and all, it just really transported you to this fantasy land in Hyrule where you were really felt like you were on this adventure with Link. And it was just an amazing experience. And at the time, just there hadn't really been like a 3D world done to this level of quality, and that's part of the reason why this game set the bar so high for a lot of developers and games going forward. Because one thing that Nintendo can do really good is that they can take a concept that seems so complex and somehow simplify it in a way that is appealing to the masses. So again, running around in the 3D space, solving dungeons and everything was like, well, yeah, you just take Link of the Past and turn it into 3D. But well, first of all, not many people could do a quality game like the way Link to the Past was, let alone transform that into a 3D space. And Nintendo was just a master of that, and how they were able to just do that and give us a very fun playground to play in, where you're gaining items, more or less the same formula like Link to the Past. But again, because we went to 3D and all, it just really heightened that level of immersion and sense of adventure and all that. And again, just running around in Hyrule Field, even nowadays, it seems a little bland and a little empty. But back then, it was just a joy, right? That you're running through there. It felt like a dream, right? And all like that you get to experience that almost in real time. And it was truly fantastical. I didn't play this game until 1999, but it was a reason why I ended up buying a Nintendo 64 was because of this game. Because it was getting crazy good reviews at the time and all. And I was like, I gotta experience this. And the game itself, the puzzles, the dungeon designs and all that are still to me some of the best ever. Um, my favorite personal Zelda game. I still love this style of Zelda game where you're going a dungeon, getting an item, to unlock certain areas, and then to help you fight a boss. I still like that formula a bit more than what Breath of the Wild did. We'll talk about Breath of the Wild in its time, and it is an amazing game. But I still slightly prefer this style more, and this game for me still is the GOAT when it comes to that. And just it was just amazing. The story to it and all. I mean, it's not anything like, let's say, like Metal Gear Solid or Xenogears, but that's not what it's trying to do, right? And all but it's a very solid story for what it is. And yeah, cool bosses in it. The last battle is really awesome as well too. And really made this series legendary, no pun intended. And definitely, I mean, it's the highest rated game of all time on Metacritic. Again, some of that I feel is because there just weren't as many reviewers back then, and also a lot of it was just because the newness of this game and all that, because we weren't used to this kind of stuff back then. I think that played heavily into it. But even to this day, though, it is still considered one of the best games of all time. So there's a channel that I like watching on YouTube. They're called GVG, and they recently had this really ambitious project, pretty much throughout this whole year, where they were asking their community, vote for your favorite game for a system, right? So I think they started with the Nintendo Entertainment System and worked their way all the way up till the Switch 2. It's a really fun series. They pretty much did it all throughout this year. And a lot of it was just, because it's like the best games on the Nintendo, according to you, the best games on the Xbox, according to you, the best games on the PlayStation 1 or 2, according to you. So they did pretty much all the systems, right? I mean, not some of the more obscure ones, but the major ones anyways. And then at the very end, they basically took all the games that were ranked as like number 10, I guess, on all these systems, and then ultimately had a big poll saying, okay, now out of all these games, which is your favorite top 10? Or no, or they did like the top 50 games, I believe. And so I was watching the series right all the way through, and the game that ended up coming up at number 2 was this one, still Ocarina of Time. So even to this day, this game is highly revered. Breath of the Wild beat it, right? But this game was still, the fact that it still got number 2, it shows that this game is still very beloved by a lot of people, and all, even with a lot of its more archaic design choices and all, because some of the stuff hasn't aged quite as well. But even then, just the overall adventure that you go through on this game was really unparalleled at the time. And I can definitely see why. I think that it is very deserving of its title of the highest rated game of all time, even if that comes with a bit of an asterisk right on it, with the reasons that I've mentioned before. It is still, to me, just that good of a game that it earns its place at that. And definitely, all things considered, I can see why this game was the best game of this year. My personal game of this year also, just right behind, or just right ahead, I'm sorry, of Metal Gear Solid. Just an amazing good time. Such a great game. Such a great game. And again, I didn't play it until 1999, but left an impression on me. And also, this game I have ranked as my 10th favorite game of all time. Just an amazing experience, and one that is legendary. And that pun was intended. But yeah, great game. So great year. I mean, it's so many good stuff came out this year. And that's, hopefully I gave a little bit of an insight as to why this year is highly revered as one of the best of all time in video game history. Just so many good things. And even with like the Saturn that was on its way out and all, it still left us with a lot of cool games for those that were willing to give them a chance. And the PlayStation just had so many good stuff. And then the Nintendo 64 has some decent games, but then it had the GOAT, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. So an amazing year. And at the tail end of it, we got the Dreamcast in Japan. So just to touch base a little bit on it. So again, we're going into 6th generation graphics here. And so what we had already kind of experienced with this level of graphic fidelity was like, let's say, for example, Virtua Fighter 3 and that Scud racing game in the arcades for the Model 3 arcade hardware. And so the Dreamcast was kind of giving us a glimpse of what the future was going to look like, because it looked like we were going to start getting quality looking games of that level at home. So like Virtua Fighter 3, the tournament edition, I believe, came out this year on the Dreamcast. And then there was also Sonic Adventure. And so the games were just looking amazing, right? And I remember seeing some of the previews in the magazines back then that they're like, holy shit, this is what we're going to get at home. We thought that something like Virtua Fighter 3, which had just come out a few years prior in the arcades, that it would be years until we could play this at home. But it looks like we're going to be getting it. And so the Dreamcast was kind of giving a glimpse of that there, right? Of what we could be experiencing at home. So we just had this amazing year of 1998, right? With all the cool stuff that I just talked about. And then we're getting a glimpse of the future of, with what the Dreamcast was showing, not just for Sega going forward, right? And all, but just video games in general. And my poor little brain was just like, oh my God, the best is yet to come. And on that note, we'll leave it there, as again, I'll talk more about the Dreamcast as I'm more familiar with the North American launch of it and all. But just suffice to say that it was there was some excitement coming out of the Dreamcast from Japan, mainly with its visuals and all. It didn't have a big lineup in Japan that it had come out with, so it wasn't, it was a, I think it had a lot to do with that they just couldn't produce as many Dreamcasts and all, and it didn't have the best launch lineup over there. But stuff like Sonic Adventure and Virtual Fighter 3 Tournament Edition, or Tournament Battle, I think it's what it's called, they were starting to turn some heads. And so we'll get more into that into next year of 1999 as we end off, or not end off, but we had a pretty good year for the fifth generation, and we're starting to get a glimpse of the future with the sixth generation. And so now we're getting into the futuristic stuff, at least what it felt like at the time. And it was very exciting times and all that. I was becoming an adult. Again, I was 18. I turned 18 in 1998, so I was starting to live out on my own, and so I had some disposable income where I could start really. I was just buying up a lot of these games, and maybe not the best use of my money at the time, but it definitely left me with a lot of cool memories and really expanded my imagination. And so it was a great time to be a video game player at this time. But we will get into 1999 in the following episode. So till then, hope you enjoyed this. At the very least, hope it gave you some noise in the background. And I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.